Okay, this is episode number 42 of Counterpoints, a show sponsored by Esportpools, which is a site where you can do fantasy esports, but you can also do betting. And what I like actually is, as far as I know, because I remember this from the major, the way they do the line or whatever there in the betting goes on how much people have bet. Like, you know, it auto adjusts. So if a lot of people bet on one team, like the odds go, like, I guess, down for them, you know. And so that's what's good about this, okay? Because if you actually know what you're talking about, but you let every idiot in the world go and make a bet, you will get better odds sometimes for the team you want to bet on. So if that isn't enticing enough, then you probably don't want to bet, in which case, stop listening. Right. Episode 41 of Counterpoints. Usual host, Thorin. I mean, obviously. That'd be pretty next level. No, what would be so sick is I once heard this thing, you know, about how if you want to work less, you try and find every element of your job that you can outsource. Mate, imagine if there was just, like, episode 42 was like, I'm your host, Najit Sahid. I'm here as Thorin's assistant host, and we'll be hosting this week's episode. And I've
imagine if you could just clone yourself and have a second person just staying at home hosting your shows at all times.
You mean go down what we call the Shocks route, where Shocks famously, when he was in Epsilon, where it was just like him, Kiyashima, and then a bunch of people you've never heard of, right? When he was in this team, he actually did say to some of us, he goes, sometimes I wish I could just clone myself and play all the positions. And he was the in-game leader, by the way. So when your own in-game leader says that, first of all, not the best attitude. You know, you've got to kind of work with what you've got. And funnily enough, though, bizarrely, MSL never told me the same thing. Must just be a good guy, though. That's what I meant. Just must be a good guy. That's the only implication I was carrying there.
Different styles of leadership, Doctor.
Speaking of which, dude, right, real question quickly, Moses, before, this is still the intro, by the way, everyone. Right, real question, Moses. If a team of 5 MSLs played, how well do you think they'd do? Because here's the thing, they'd be smart. They'd definitely be smart.
Oh, God. Top 25? Top 20?
Okay, not bad, not bad. ESWC then, he could get out of the first group at ESWC maybe on a good day.
Yeah, they could get out of the groups. Maybe a nice fortunate group. One of the old school groups where there was like 2 teams, like one from Africa and like one from like India. They could
immediately into Africa, of course. First, he didn't even say country. He just said he didn't even have to. He just goes just the continent of Africa. Anywhere. Basically, if he's playing versus 5 people from Africa, 5 people from India, I think he's got a chance. We're not going to listen. We're not going to promise anything can happen, but he's got a chance, right? So the person there making sweeping statements about entire continents was Moses, Jason Mose O'Toole, co-host, usual co-host, and in this episode we've got 2 guests. Usually, 2 guests means neither of them had the name power to be the one guest. And I didn't want people to see featuring someone I don't know and tune out. So what I do as well is you also, as a real point, never actually know when you've never seen someone talk or do like shows. You never know if they're going to be like really quiet. So usually if it's people who are totally unknown, that says I like to put 2 so that, I mean, the joke is I always say I pit them against each other and then I see who actually, you know, deserves to escape from the deathmatch. Yep. But really, it's just so that, like, you know, there's not as much pressure on each person to talk. So the guest in the bottom right-hand corner is Mauisnake. And he is someone who I found because he does YouTube videos where he'll sort of like pick a player and he kind of like scouts them. Like he watches a bunch of the demos of them and he kind of figures out their style of play, where they fit into the role. And the reason why that's actually pretty useful, I think, is because first of all, like most people who actually have, this is the dilemma, unfortunately, of content creation. Because you don't make that much from pure content creation, people like Yanko, Moses, they don't just do a video like that, because the actual amount you would make for the amount of effort that takes, like let's say it's 40 hours work, you wouldn't make that much back from it. So as a result, most people don't do that. And as a result, we can only tend to study whole teams and watch whole matches. And another aspect, by the way, is that when you watch a match, you aren't watching one player. You kind of just getting the broad strokes of how did the team play. Maybe you could figure out how they're using a player, but you still won't know all the details. So I actually think it's very useful. I hope more people do that type of content where you pick a player you're going to focus on and you go deep on it. And hopefully you get insights and little details that either we can never get or maybe we would pick up after a long time, you know, with like hints from in-game leaders and stuff. So he does a lot of content like that. And the bottom left-hand corner is Max_Melit, who is a journalist he is a journalist for DotEsports and Blitz Esports. I think he did some content for, right?
Yeah, wrote the script for the videos and working with them to sort of bring some of my experience with feature writing into the world of video production.
I mean, by the way, just before we finish up the introduction part, oh yeah, I should have mentioned this. So Max Melit is actually from Australia. He's from the Australian scene. And much like many people who've come out of Australia, he wants to be relevant. So he's had to comment on teams not from Australia, not even from his hemisphere. He's had to learn about play. You know, that's how you get relevant. But I forgot one other detail, actually, which is that Mauisnake is also the in-game leader of Who Gives a Fuck. Right, that's all that matters about that. So just wanted to make sure, I want to get all the details correct. That part's true. They needed to know that you're in-game leader. It's just that, no, mate, it'd be wasting my life to say the name of the team. No one's ever going to hear it again.
I was actually wondering for a second if the team name was Who Gives a Fuck.
Yeah, so was like,
case closed. I think I made my point. No, at this point you should. They could get a little bit of fame off that, mate. People will start Googling after I say that now. So, and Mauisnake is also from Hawaii. So very, very sort of international episode here, you know, because
Aloha.
Did you just sell out your entire culture by saying that? Is that?
It's not bad. He got you there, Duncan.
Yes.
Listen, he's part of the North American party. He's part of the US of A.
You have to understand, okay? Hawaii, a lot of people don't know this. Hawaii is not actually like a normal country, you know. It's not like an island or like an area. Hawaii is literally where a volcano exploded, overflowed, and then we know, you know, in the movie the lava's all running down the side, right? Obviously, eventually, it's not just lava; it settles and it becomes rock. That's it. It wasn't an island that happened. It was a volcano, and where all that rock settled, someone came, put a load of houses, made an entire indigenous culture. Then Moses people came along and said, I'll trade you 2 sticks of Bazooka Joe bubblegum, and this is a gun, now give me that now. And so now it is part of the United States of America. I believe that's how it went by Moses.
And by the way, we would like to create a naval base and have an entire military campaign for the Pacific Ocean out of your state.
Exactly.
Country.
And listen, I don't know much about Hawaii. All I know about Hawaii is from watching UFC. So I always knew about the upbringing of BJ Penn. I'll tell you what, it was a bit startling, actually. I heard all these stories, you know, even when he was a kid, everyone was getting involved in these ridiculous street fights. Like, you literally had to be able to fight to, like, keep your name pure, to, like, have people not fuck with you. I know everyone thinks right now, well, that's just an Immortals boot camp, isn't it? No. This was just like the whole culture was like that, you know. That's you know, it's not like an after party now. This was life. So obviously I know Mauisnake's come from hard times, and he's ready to deliver some straight fire. So this is going to be one of the episodes where we don't just talk about like the weekly news or results. What I want to do is have somewhere we discuss different elements. So people always use this term, loose playing style, for teams. And you can think of a few famous teams traditionally, like NIP at the beginning of CSGO. Probably the most famous one I think that actually embodies this style was probably actually the EnVyUs team. Because you looked at how they played and they they'll even tell, like, they had some very simple tactics. Some of them were like just go into a site dry. And then in the more recent times, I think it's probably best typified by the Fnatic team that had Dennis rather than Pronax. Because again,
even the Pronax one, probably.
Yeah.
A little bit, but that one was more extreme, obviously, because then in that one they didn't even have an in-game lead. That was true. So that's kind of like the very simple, broad stroke of what that concept is. But there's a lot you can go into there. And plus, as you've even seen when I'm describing each of those teams, you're probably thinking in your own head, they're not all identical, you know? They all have a different way of employing that kind of approach. So what do you actually think of this question, okay, Moses? Does CSGO, this is going to sound like a naive question, but it's a real one that a lot of people have had to pit them against themselves many times. Do you think CSGO in general like benefits from you using a loose playing style? Does it reward a loose playing style? What do you think? I mean, we come from a background of 1.6, obviously. What do you think of that?
It's always funny because I obviously, like you said, 1.6 background. I always thought that the loose playing styles that we saw in CSGO, I didn't necessarily like them, but I've learned to like appreciate kind of what they can provide. And I think, I mean, CSGO does benefit from it in the sense that it's always good to have different teams playing different styles. It's exciting to see different teams have different strengths and weaknesses and what they can do. But I think in general, as we've seen CSGO on, the loose playing style is kind of slowly fading away just because its big strength is the fact that, you know, you have so many individual players that can outskill your opponents. I mean, you think of some of those teams, the Envys, the Fnatics, the NIP of their early days. Like, one thing they had over everyone was they were probably the most skilled teams of those eras. And I think now that everyone's kind of caught up, the loose playing style is tougher to be consistent with. You see teams like with loose playing styles like win an event or do good for an event or two, but it's tough to like stay in that top 4 realm with a loose playing style because just by nature, it's an inconsistent style. This is where you allow a lot of individual freedom to players to make decisions. And once you do that, you get the good and the bad. You get like the playmaking ability of an individual star, an individual player in certain situations, but you're also going to see players overextending or trying to make a play when they shouldn't, or making, fundamental mistakes at the wrong time. So, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, and it's very, very tough to make it work. I think it's actually, to be honest with you, I think it's actually the most effective playing style if you can make it work. Just not many teams can, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay, so generally when I ask questions on the show, unless I specifically say someone's name, anyone can jump in. And plus, once someone makes a point, you can definitely jump in. But in general, I start people out by roughly setting them up. So I would ask you this, Mauisnake. When Moses says there that some of those teams had some of the most skilled players, actually, just as a bit of context, fans now unfortunately won't know because of the name value. But yes, believe it or not, the EnVyUs lineup that was like Smiths and Kiyashima, Shocks, Happy, who's the other one? MBK. At the time, that was arguably the strongest man-for-man lineup. You have to realize Smiths was actually very good at the end of LDLC. Kiyashima was fucking straight, he had incredibly good aim. People won't realize now because the name value is different and they're just not as good players, some of them. That was actually considered the more skilled team than the Fnatic team. They just didn't actually, for whatever reason, they didn't win as many tournaments. They still were very successful, by the way. So along these lines then, do you think that would you agree with what Moses said there at the end? I think that's kind of an interesting point that essentially maybe if you had the skilled players, maybe that is actually the best playing style for you.
I think EnVyUs, they had a loose style, but a lot of their plays were just kind of gimmicks and kind of surprises. And once you kind of catch on to that, you're not going to get surprised as much. One of the things they would do to win the major that they won was they would just pile up behind a smoke, flash through it, and it feels like a rank S kind of play, something you see on a Twitch stream or something nowadays. But they have fragging power behind it to do that, but there's an idea there, and it's kind of just be idiots, but do it together. So yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good point to make, because obviously the point you're making there is it's not like they were loose in as much as everyone's working for themselves, and doing what they want. It was still a concept, right? It's just it was a very simplistic concept. Yeah,
it was just really simplistic strategies. Some of them would make plays on CT side individually, but T side, when I actually went back and rewatched some of the major they won, it didn't seem on T side they're all just everyone's working picks. On some maps they would do that Cash, but other maps they would just kind of pile up and then just
Well, I mean, they're the ones who started up that 4-1 death ball idea, right? They're the ones that made that super classic with just Happy on one side of the map, just doing his thing, lurking with an op, all that fun stuff.
And the other thing with that Cash was it Katowice 2015, that semi-final against NIP?
Yes.
Where NIP just completely figured them out and destroyed them on T side, because it's just Happy just did the exact same thing every round, just sitting quad, just jump picking, I think it was. Yeah, so I guess the thing with that style is that if you can't adjust to it, then eventually your sort of default CT setups can get figured out.
The funny thing, I remember, Duncan, you'll remember this. I think we've talked about it on a couple, or you've mentioned it in shows before, which is the Virtus Pro tactic, where they were just every time we play Envy, there were rounds where we would have 4 guys with a rifle, and they would just send one guy with a Tech 9 a little bit aggressive to fire some shots, and then they're just we know Happy's going to hear that Tech 9 and think that he wants the eco frags and start pushing, and then we just find ourselves an easy pick.
Yeah, that's what they really did. No, what's interesting is I think a thought I immediately had when you were all breaking it down like that is that's another distinction I think you need to make, which is that it's very different if you have a concept behind what you're doing, but you have a loose style, or you have a loose style in the literal sense that it's it'll sound extreme, but there were times when some of these teams did make plays that were just a bunch of individual players do some stuff, and maybe they're so good they win the round anyway. And by the way, in its own way, that is effective on a psychological level. If that keeps working, what the fuck does the enemy in-game leader do to that? You can't just make 4 different adjustments and then know that next round they might not do anything. So, for example, the reason why I always actually thought that the Fnatic with Dennis lineup, the one at the end of 2015, early 2016, the reason why I actually think that for me is the zenith of that style, and will probably either you could have a team as good, but I don't know if anyone could do it better, is because I think they kind of cheated at their loose style. They went from a Pronax style, which was a hybrid. They had a couple of players, but here's the thing, okay, the Fnatic team with Pronax was like this. Olafmeister is the playmaker. So already it's not just 5 people doing whatever they want. He initiates plays. Crims was just like a soldier. He just does stuff like in the middle of the round, sort of. He helps set you up on the entry. And then from that, sometimes if they need to correct, Pronax makes a read. Right? Already you've kind of got some pretty distinct roles, people who are doing similar things each round, and you've got kind of a hierarchy of how to make your play. Now, when they made the Dennis lineup, they got to cheat even more because they upgraded Pronax's skill, right? Okay, they didn't necessarily have the amazing reads the same way. Didn't maybe need to. Also, by the way, they did not win as convincingly, if you remember, as the old Fnatic did. They kind of just scraped some events. But I almost felt like it was half cheating to say it was just a joke there about Fnatic half cheating. I always thought it was almost like half cheating to say it was a loose style, because actually that was players who, first of all, kind of had a distinct set of hierarchy within their team, and they were such good players individually that they, in a way, were kind of like mini in-game leaders, you know. A lot of them actually had like a good read for what they were going to do and what their team was going to do. Remember, they didn't make that team until 4 of them had been together like a year and a half. It's not like they made that team from day one, like, right, we're going to have a loose style, do whatever. So I kind of feel like that is the ultimate variant of that. Like, what you've basically done there is cause everyone kind of understands the overall style, and everyone's like to some degree smart, and they kind of have a playbook to go off from what we had before. Well, there's like a famous saying that, like, in theory, the best team would be the one where each person was the leader. So then he doesn't have to wait for comms from one person, doesn't have to give imperfect information. So I feel like that's like a extreme version of it, even when we talk about that concept, you know.
Yeah, well, basically just describe the Faze lineup. Like, just what we want from the Faze lineup. You basically word for word described like our hope for what they want. Yeah, the new one with because that's what you want from them, is like all their sort of individual pieces to be so just self-aware and independent and able to make their own plays within sort of a general call of what Carrigan makes at the start of the round.
I think that's one of like the big benefits of those looser play styles, is that you do, like Duncan, you said, you do get to upgrade the in-game leader, right? Like, that's always the conversation, is who's going to be like, you know, your in-game leader is usually lighter on the fragging, and, you know, he's always paying attention to something else, so he's not having as much impact in terms of sheer numbers. But that's where the loose play style comes in, because you do get upgraded, and usually it's with the in-game leader. And that's why you see so many like loose play style teams, you know, setting up at a defaults, going for some picks, or having very, very simple basic strategies, because you don't actually have that in-game leader. So they keep things as like dumbed down as possible, and just allow, you know, the mid-round call to come to them when their players are in a good position or make a play. And like, if you all have good enough game sense, you'll be able to kind of tell exactly where to go, or someone will make some kind of a call. But that skill, the tough part is, I said I think it's like the best or the most effective way to be a team, but I don't think right now, I don't think it's possible, because I don't think we have one team that has enough, you know, consistent skill. There's too many teams that have like amazing talent. Like, you're just going to get beat using that skill. Like, your benefit is that you have guys who can win duels. And I think there's too many good people on too many different teams that you can't win duels reliably or consistently anymore the way you could.
G2 like are kind of doing that, though. Yeah. They're like, Apex is just like making a lot of plays. Like, I think what their loose style, though, is like they're really loose on CT side. So like Kenny will just like jump out of like apartment window on Inferno and just like try to like frag everyone. Shox also with the MP9 is just loose everywhere. He just goes wherever he feels like. And I think when people are talking about loose styles, one of the reasons that Fnatic team was so successful was that they had a really loose CT side, whereas like a team like Astralis today has like really nice setups. They flash for each other, they're peeking with each other. But Fnatic and teams like G2 today they're like deciding when they want to push a smoke, to flash through it, to have an MP9 and just push wherever Shox feels like. Shox is just anywhere on the map at any given time with an MP9. So
I mean, that's obviously why that works, though, because in a weird way, right? Say I'm the in-game leader who's on the T side, and I'm trying to make like the mid-round read. I can't know that, right? Because he just pushed in the boiler room on Inferno. That means that, like, you know, they're backing off on the banana. Like, there isn't an obvious logic to that. Whereas the game's sort of taught you amongst most teams, you know, for everything that they do, we have a response, which is kind of, that's the logical thing to do. Whereas the best counterplay always doesn't occur if they do what seemingly is random, because it's random in as much as maybe that one player decided to do it. Their team isn't sending me a message that this is what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree with your point there, then, Moses, which is kind of like you could reframe it as this. Part of the problem with doing like a really pure loose style at the moment is, thanks to the last 2 roster changes, a lot of the tactical teams upgraded a lot of the skill as well. So you're no longer playing a team that has like, you know, 2 or 3 players who are more supportive elements, and then therefore, maybe you can outfrag all their team because they've only got a couple of stars in this set way. There's a lot of fucking talent in the top teams right now, so I think it's tough to make it work.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, on top of that, I think we've also seen a shift, from that looser playing style. I think one of the things that kind of countered it is how much now coordinated aggression we see on CT sides, where, teams are more than willing to give up a bomb site and get 2 to 3 players to push another side of the map for that information or to trade one of those by the way, in a looser play style, your stars are usually, not always, but usually on like the ends of the map, because that's where you can isolate, they're usually like, if you take Mirage, for an example, usually in Palace, not usually in B halls, but usually in Palace to try and find a duel, or towards a ramp to try and find a duel, a timing where there's a rotation. On cash, you usually have them at the B bomb site to maybe try and find a duel in the B site once the smokes fade. So when you get aggressive as a CT team, you can kind of neutralize that by maybe getting the kill outright, maybe just trading it off, but then you take away a lot of the power of that the more individual plays that are trying to be made. And that's the big thing. I think these tactical teams right now have the edge at the moment. And I think the more interesting thing with talking about loose play styles is watching the teams who are trying to transition out of loose play styles. Like if you look at like Fnatic, who seemed like they wanted to try that for most of this year. G2 for most of this year really struggled with
G2.
it. Navi really struggled with, Navi tried to get, it almost felt looser from, obviously they were like the height of the other end of the spectrum, but now they're trying to like go back a little bit more. So it's always funny watching teams like, go back and forth and try and make some strategic style work now that the loose playing styles aren't as effective as they used to be.
I mean, one thing when we were saying about like the skill of the players as well, that's also why I think it's like, it's not as black and white as like, right, we have a lot of skilled players, therefore we should do a loose playing style. Because one thing, if you notice all these teams we're listing that made it work, they always have at least like 2 players who are like ridiculously smart, either in terms of like raw game sense or just knowing the game. Like if you talk about the EnVyUs team, NBK and Shox are 2 of the smartest players in the game you've probably ever seen. Likewise, if you go to teams like any of the past teams, it's not... The reason why I think it's so tough is because you can't just have players... Like, part of the way that they're going to create a play on the fly is they've got to have an understanding of the game on some special level. They're not just going to... It's not... Put it this way, it's not as simple as like you have 5 people who are going to aim and then they're going to do something and it's going to work because you're going to headshot people. There's some nuance to it still, and that can be tough because having someone like Flusher or Shox... Like, these people are thin on the ground. There's not many of those people around there who are, like, good fraggers but, like, super smart in their own way.
And I was just going to add on to the whole thing about, like, the loose style is that when you play against a structured team like North, who has so many talented players that can take over a game individually, like a Config, it feels like they have something to fall back on if they don't have the individual form there. And I get a lot of that, like, when I watch Astralis as well. It's like, even if they can't get entries on like overpass or something when they're trying to take bathrooms early, it feels like they always have like a set piece or some like plan B to fall back on. And I don't think necessarily if you have like that pure loose style, I feel like you're sort of banking a lot on form in that way, and at the very least you can sort of play down as a tactical team and rely on sort of the more macro players. But I don't know if that's the same with the loose stuff.
Okay, where do you think the current SK falls like on the spectrum?
It's a lot tougher because of how much they like put, and like how much they allow their individual players to just make weird plays.
I mean,
and
put
like,
it this way,
how much confidence they have.
On the one level, okay. The problem with that topic is as soon as you hear SK, you think Fallen, you think incredibly smart player, you think someone who had a massive effect on the metagame. But at the same time, if I think of this SK, what's funny is I actually don't think of Cold Zero first. I think of Fur, because like for me, all the success they had was when he was a monster. And when I watch his style of play, like I don't know him as a person, but like I don't think he's one of those guys with like an insanely high in-game IQ. He's a fucking amazing player, and a lot of the plays he does makes it look like he's just kind of like, he just has insane confidence in himself.
Yeah, his confidence is ridiculous.
He strikes me of like this era's like JW, like the classic JW. He just does it with a rifle because he just likes to get aggressive somewhere and he gets a kill, finds information, throws the opponent into disarray when he's on the CT side. So that's always kind of struck me watching him play this year.
I mean, to me, he's like the defining player of this SK. It seems like, to me at least.
Yeah,
I'd say that's accurate.
That's a fair statement. Yeah, for sure. Just because he's like, even the funny thing is I haven't felt like either of like the errors, like the SK of last year. Like, yes, coldzera is the best player in the world and he was the most consistent, but I always thought Fallen defined it more just because his opping style, like when you watch it, that's what came to me, had like such huge impact on the way it was played. So that's kind of always funny to think about that. But I think SK is probably, I think at the moment they're on like the looser end of the spectrum, not by far, but I mean they've talked about it a bunch of times in interviews that they've tried to get they've tried to go that route away from the tactical like system based approach that we always talked about with those guys. And this is one of the strengths of having a loose play style is you don't necessarily open your, like if you're playing a little bit more loose instead of structured, you have the ability, or I mean you don't get counter-stratted as much. You know, when teams are now doing so much research, if you're just going through the set motions for a strategy, teams now have an analyst who has helped them study and prepared them for, you know, when you see these two players clearing out this position, or when you see these two smokes being thrown into the bomb site, this is what's coming. This is where the main force of the attack is going to be. So if you have that looser play style, this is always something that, you know, the old Fnatic when they were dominant, it's like either one of the eras where people were just like, we don't know what they're doing. Like we have no way to read where they're going to be on the map, where to rotate our players in a position, and that was something that was always a great advantage because they always had like that fear into their opponents of making a move. You never knew what was coming, and I think that's what kind of SK was thinking of when they decided to start playing, you know, with less structure into their game, was prevent themselves from getting counter-stratted, was be more dynamic when they're doing, especially when you're doing so many tournaments in a row. Because I mean, that's the other thing we have to talk about. When you have this kind of a schedule, it's not easy to go back and, you know, refresh yourselves on specific tactics for a map that maybe you haven't played in an event or two, or change up some kind of set structured tactic. This is a much easier way to still be effective without putting in as much work, so to speak.
Okay.
I think that SK, if they need it, they can actually be even looser. You're talking about them like having some like structure and whatnot, or I mean like being loose already, but I don't think Phelps has been like fully unleashed yet on this team. When he was on Immortals, you'd consistently find him just like finding his way onto some weird part of the map, and it's like how did he get here? Even on T side, and then he'd just like get some like 2-man flank kills or whatever. But it was pretty obvious when he started playing with SK, Fallen really had to reel him in. Wallaby Beetle wrote some article about how he would just push too many smokes, and it's like, it's not giving coldzera, Taco, or I mean, even Fallen the space that they need to just like clutch out rounds the way they want to. And now he's kind of like he'll push a smoke here and there, but it feels like you kind of see it coming more so now. Like if you see a top mid smoke, Phelps is going to push on the right side of it, a top mid or whatever, pushing catwalk. And that's kind of just a simple play now. Whereas before, sometimes he would like throw his own weird smoke and then jump through it also or something. It doesn't seem like that Phelps has been like really, he's not really fully brought out yet on this version of SK.
I think it's a testament to how good of a player he is that he's still having impact. 'Cause I remember as well, like Fallen said it in Impact or in interviews as well that, you know, they gave him all the space he wanted when he first joined, and it wasn't working. And we saw that the first few events with Phelps.
Yeah, for sure.
We were just like, oh, this isn't going well. And so I think they're still in adjustment period, and I think they've gone the other way where now it's like Phelps has to fit them. And, you know, still, I think you're exactly right. We haven't seen the full potential of what this lineup can achieve when he finds his proper place, his proper role within the team.
Well, here's the funny thing. Do you remember when we did like the episode where they'd made that roster move, okay, officially? And one of the things that I'm trying to think back of the order of it, but I remember I was actually quite skeptical that SK would work. And the whole reason why is because after watching him in Immortals, my logic, because I generally think it's really tough to make a player change his playing style. So typically, especially if it's like a young, talented player, my philosophy is more like, right, you sort of let him do what he can do and is good at, and then you try and build the rest around him. And that's clearly like kind of what SK did. And so the amazing thing to me, the reason why I'm so impressed with the current SK is because I actually feel like eventually Phelps became what Fur used to be. And he's like, right, I have to play within certain restrictions, give other people the room. And then listen, Phelps is never going to be the star of this SK gaming. He's not. No. But the team is fucking amazing.
It's still good.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I'm bummed about that we don't actually see too often is, and I think this is just going to be permanently burned into my brain, is Phelps was always so much fun to watch on maps like Mirage. I still have that game where he just completely annihilated Navi at IEM Oakland last year. I think pretty sure that's a vet. Maybe it's not burned into my brain. But like he was just constantly boosted into window, and he was constantly able to get aggressive towards jungle, towards murder hole, towards catwalk, like whatever. He just controlled that part of the map, and you don't see that as much anymore because like he has that weird aggressive lurking style, and it seems like they don't put him in those positions as much anymore. Where like he actually like lurks on the opponent's like behind enemy lines and the opponent's side of the map and finds kills, finds one pick, finds a kill on the rotation. But it's just insane how impactful that style can be, and I haven't seen him like utilize that play style in some time, which is kind of a bummer.
It kind of feels like certain tournaments have like their own like little meta of kind of just like hotspots that are really keyed in on, and that tournament definitely felt like the window room was like that opening that a lot of terrorists were like taking an avenue to like get some kind of map control. You didn't see it like actually as much in Malmo. They didn't boost Phelps more than like twice in there this time. But I do remember at Oakland it was like just like every round basically.
Well, that was when they were like that was one of the events where they were like trying to like get him to be situated. Like they were giving him whatever he wanted, right?
Yeah.
Or actually, that was still when he was in Immortals. I feel like I'm going crazy.
In Immortals in that one.
So he was getting to do whatever the fuck he wanted.
Indeed.
They all blend together, Duncan.
So one thing listen, I don't know why you're implying all Brazilians.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Like, personally, I think they're all distinct people. You know what? I think some of them are all right, Moses.
Prove it.
I think some of them are all right, yeah. Yeah, Zeus, he's all right. Get a few tequilas in him, he gets wild, I can tell you. Anyway,
Zeus is a good guy. I like Zeus.
I like him, yeah. He's become Americanized enough now that I can have those conversations. He doesn't say weird poetic things about putting bullets in my body. So at this point in time, we just say hello. Culture, you got to learn it, guys. So one interesting detail to tie on to the SK thing as well is I actually feel like that's why in this era, it's not just because Astralis was always ranked number 2 and number 3. So obviously teams that are near your ranking in theory should be the ones with the best chance of beating you. But I always thought, because they had never met in a series with these lineups until ECS, since they'd never met, I always said it on the show, I always felt like Astralis would actually match up the best of everyone against SK. And that's part of the reason why I feel like their style is so rigid. I mean, it's not literally like they have a lot they can change out of it, but in general, they have that set approach, especially when they're on the CT side, that I always thought they should match up very well with SK. Because if you know anything about the history of that team, what's amazing is, like, the T side, Glaive has changed a lot, especially because obviously he has Device in a very different role than he used to have. But the way they do their CT sides is, like, literally, they almost created that style. It's like an evolution out of it. If you go back far enough to when they had Fetish, they had this crazy CT style where it was like the most defensive CT setups I've ever seen. Like, you would play inside a site, but you had incredible aimers at all positions. So you would just play like crossfires, and you would play positions where if it worked, that's why they used to have like the 12 CT half, where they just shut you down completely, because it's like, if that works, that's the worst style to play against in the world. It's like, if you go around the corner, he's there, but they've got the 2-man setup, and then the counter flash you and shoot you instantly in the head, and you feel like where's the opening? Like no one's ever pushing out. You're never catching someone off first.
Yeah, they just turtle.
Going in. It's like, and even though it's not as extreme now, like they do have a lot more coordinated, like 2-man plays, in a way it comes out of that. And I feel like that style in general does generally work very well against loose styles, which is why, and this is what I want to ask, because while I feel in general like that, if anyone disagrees they can, but what I wanted to know was, why do you think then that Faze was so successful against Astralis? Because again, a lot of people would have defined the old Faze as loose, right?
Yeah, they were.
I think that Faze, I think they just kind of, actually, to be honest, I couldn't even give you a good reason why Faze was so successful against Astralis in an area where it seemed like no one else was. I would have to say it's because they have such, like, Nico is just such an unbelievable talent. And then I think here's just a general criticism of Astralis. I don't know if this impacted the Faze stuff at all, but I would like to see them get more loose. I think that's a team that doesn't make mistakes, that's so fundamentally sound and structured and everything. But when they need a play to be made, they don't have anyone that's willing to really break out of that system. Like, they don't really have anyone that's willing to just kind of take over the game in that sense, because that's not the way that they're geared. That's not the way that Glaive has them playing.
Well, I can tell you a good and a bad thing about those players, if you know any of them, is part of what was bad, right, is that in the past, I don't know if Glaive knew this or whether this is just something I've put together, but if you ever talked to them in the days before when they were with the other in-game leaders, the bad part is that they would all be like, oh, I didn't chalk that game. It wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. You know, we lost as a team. You know, it wasn't my fault. So they had that mentality in game. You know, everyone was playing not to make a mistake. Now, in a way, it almost feels like Glaive turned that into a good thing. Like, yeah, what we're going to do is we're all just going to do what we planned and prepared. That way, you know, you always can feel like, oh, well, we know what to do right next time. And, you know, again, it's no one's fault. The bad part of that is sometimes it being your fault is just the negative outcome of taking responsibility and making a big play that can win you the whole game. And that's where I kind of agree. I don't think that they have many people who dare do anything outside the system.
The only one I can think of who would do it would be Device, but in order to do that, he'd need to have an AK. I don't think
Kirby has the potential to, skill-wise, for sure. When he's on point, Kirby can definitely make the plays, but I don't know within Astralis' structure if that's something that is readily available for him to take, if that makes sense. Like, if he's able to just, like, if he's feeling it.
I think it's more mentality, right? I don't think he has like the mentality, like that killer attitude. He's such a nice little guy. I don't think he would do that.
To go back to Thorin's question about why Faze was good against Astralis, Faze was really good at taking like kind of uncomfortable map control away from CTs. It's when they were good at Nuke, they would always like try to get people on the rafters, and when they were good at, other maps, they'll take something away from you that you kind of expect to have, or that it just keeps putting this pressure on you nonstop that there's nothing you can do about it. Like, it's like if they get people into ladder room or something on Mirage, it's kind of this thorn in your side that it's like, okay, you know a guy's there now, but we don't really have like a set of procedures in the Astralis like playbook that's gonna like get us back this map control that FaZe was so able to get consistently.
Okay, what's interesting about that point there, is that's actually one of the things I feel like where Carrigan was quite smart, is that he didn't try to design a bunch of tactics and was like, right, player A, do these first three things, which means that player B can do these two things. Like, he actually played like someone who, think about the context of him first getting Nico. He played like someone who was told before the event, right, here's the 4 players you're going to be playing with, do something with that now. Like, he wasn't trying to build some huge tactical system. He was like, how would I use these 4 players, just this game, to win the game if I had to? And so a lot of what he did actually smacked to me of someone who knew like literally what his star player's strength was. So he was right. If I had Nico, what I'd do on this map is I'd try and set him up for this favorable duel over and over again. I'd try and get him in this position so that then he could take this fight, which would open that part of the map up. And actually, in a weird way, that's why I always felt like the Fnatic with Dennis was the extreme end of the scale, because as much as people want to show how loose they were with Pronax, which they were to some degree, there was still always like a level of leadership, as in like when the initial move breaks down, Pronax can make the call and then we follow the call, because that's actually the Swedish mentality. But when I look at the team when they had Dennis, like, here's the thing, even though Dennis was friends with them and they wanted to get him in the team and he was always a loose in-game leader anyway, to me, I think that entire team where it was the Dennis era of Fnatic, if I had to guess, I don't know internally, that sounded to me like one night in a bar, Flusher and Olafmeister were like, we're 2 of the best players in the whole world. And Pronax does like an all right job, but why don't we just call the plays? Like, if me and you were playing, it's almost like that thing where, like the superstars team up and they're like, call my play every time. That's like almost felt like what they wanted to do. They were like, listen, I want to go to this spot because I know I can exploit that guy. But the in-game leader, remember, doesn't think on an individual 1v1 level. He has to think collectively, hit what's the weak spots of the opponents, what we're trying to do as a team. So that's why I think the loose style is always interesting, because it's either tends to be someone who's not that good an in-game leader but has skilled players. Because if you do it, I feel like if you're a Carrigan, you have more of a logic in mind, like you're saying here, Mauisnake, where it's like you are doing something very loose, but there's a logic as to how that would work into the metagame.
For sure.
Yeah, I think you need that, but I think also that's where the balance comes in, because you want that in-game leader thinking on like the team idea, but then you want him positioning a player to make some kind of an individual play. You want because some kind of players just need to be able to make their own decisions and do things their own way. I think you put them in some kind of a position, and this is all in the in-game leader to find that position on the map where his individual play can benefit your overall team goal. Because you don't want to be like, this is when you're going to make your move. You don't want to micromanage in that sense, because that also hurts your own game, by the way. That's where you see in-game leaders really drop off. But you put an in-game leader in some kind of a situation where he gets to choose when to pounce, and him accomplishing his goal on an individual level benefits, what you're trying to work for as a team. And I think that's where I think that's the one thing I would say that Fnatic team with Dennis was missing, is that, you know, their players would make huge plays and have success, but it wouldn't seem like there was an overall goal. I mean, it would just be like everyone's succeeding in their own objectives, and then it's like all of a sudden you're just like, okay, the round's won. Now that sounds like a criticism. They did win 7 events in a row, so obviously 6, whatever it was. It's like, once you get over 5, I don't really give a fuck anymore.
The 5 rule, okay. So okay, here's something that's weird though about that, is that, like, to go the other way, I feel like there are players. Here's the thing, okay, again, because we're using such broad strokes when you say these terms, again, people think to themselves, right, loose style equals really skilled players, equals best way for those players to kind of like have freedom and play. Well, we all know there are players who are fucking insanely talented who need real micromanagement structure. One of the most famous I think of in my own mind is always Flamey from Na'Vi. Yeah. Because every time I've ever seen them try and play a style where you can tell they've told him, like, you have a bit of kind of wiggle room, you can kind of do a bit of what you want on this part of the map, the guy does nothing. Whereas when you give that guy like literal like set things of like follow this person or go in at this, then it's kind of like you're making use of that skill set. You know, I don't think he's the kind of person whose mentality is enough to make him a star player, even though his skill set absolutely should. So I've noticed in teams, I always feel like he's the guy I want being a bit more micromanaged, even though his skill set would tell you star player.
There was that mad story, and I wish we could get this confirmed, about like when he first joined that Na'Vi roster, when they had Starix, that he was just like, he was the coach of the team, but instead of coaching the team, he was just micromanaging Flamey for like the first like month or two. Like, this is where you move forward now. Press W. Now stop. Now shoot.
That's because the reason why, and by the way, the reason why that is believable is if you know anything about the CIS region is the ultimate loose region. People don't know this because you think now of the teams, you think of like modern day Gambit, you think of like Na'Vi when they were at their best, tactical teams that have a very set approach to getting more out of their players. But historically, I mean, we say CIS, for most of history, it was just Russia, right? Because Ukraine wasn't relevant, Kazakhstan wasn't relevant. It was just Russian, basically, but it was a similar, like, playing culture. What they would always do is they would just stack as many star players as they could. Like, the early teams, okay, who were, I mean, if I say Virtus Pro, people are going to think I mean Polish players. I'm talking literally 15 years ago when it was Russian players. They would literally get, no joke, the best 5 Russian players and make a team. That's why they weren't trolling when, like, 4 of them would open a game. They had like 5 players who were AWPers. They were superstars. So what would happen was, famously, I should really talk about Lurpus here. He's the ultimate person to ask about this because he was an in-game leader in these eras. If you ever played against these teams, their T side involved this: all 5 players cover the whole map, sit there the same way every time, and then see if one of you takes a 1v1 aim duel. If you win the 1v1 aim duel, rotate and everyone go to that side of the map. Like, that wasn't like someone thought that through. That was just how they did it, because it was like, that's like 5 individual players playing in. It's like a POG. You're like, right, I've got a pick, come in here. That really was their mentality. So that's why I have a lot of respect for Zeus and always have, because he had to go the other way. Now, admittedly, he didn't do it by himself. People like Blade, the guy who was his current coach, Kane, were kind of the middle points to his style at the end. That's another thing. People tend to build their styles from things they saw before. You know, they take something they like, go from that. So, okay, here's a question then. Max touched on it before. If ever someone was going to use a loose playing style, probably has to be this Faze, right? Isn't this Faze on paper the team when you look at it? Surely that is the way this team can work.
Kerrigan could be the Pronax, and everyone else can just kind of fill in the roles like the old Fnatic did.
I wouldn't like that, to be honest with you. It looks like it on paper, just because like the names and you know the fact that they have so many stars. But I wouldn't like that, just because I don't think Olaf has it in him anymore to be like that guy. I mean, he obviously has the skill, but I don't think he can. I don't think he has the ability to be a player who can just go to a point on the map and win 2 fights like he used to do.
At least relative to his teammates on Faze.
Yeah. And then you also have Guardian now. So when he has the AWP, you want Guardian to have time to find a pick or to get in a position or grab you an angle. I think them trying to employ a loose playing style actually would probably be the worst thing they could do with this lineup. I don't think it would work anymore. So I would like to see them, I mean, not full blown, you know, CIS like Na'Vi structure slowly execute onto a bomb site, but I would like to see them, you know, work at taking map control, you know, finding a pick here and there with Guardian. By the way, Guardian looked great at E-League, just as a heads up.
Something this Faze has been really good at is like improvising off of a strat. It seems like Kerrigan's kind of calling like loose plays, like, hey, we're going to split B this round, so take mid, then go up cat. But if like one person on Faze gets picked, they're like, okay, that's not good. So then they just go somewhere else, but they're all like really good at doing it together. So in a sense, they're kind of like, they're not like really loose right now throughout the whole round, but they're really good at just adjusting and showing that their ability to adjust is like so strong that it's kind of like as a team though that they're adjusting. So like they seem to be kind of on some kind of similar page, and I feel like they could play off each other a little more, like in a little like more loose style than they are right now. Not saying they should go full blown like default pick everywhere, but yeah, they could like employ a buddy system or something.
And see, that was the thing with like when they got knocked out of Malmo, like Gambit in that nuke game where Hobbit dropped like 30 something kills. It was just like you just wish, it's just one of the most like triggering games to watch because you just wish for them to like just tighten things up and just like stick to a plan, you know, and just like keep it simple and just put Nico in a spot where like he can just have a bit of support around him and just have just enough room to get that frag and trading onto sites.
I didn't mind that the way they played that so much. I think where we really saw a breakdown wasn't any kind of like overarching style of how they played. I think it was more deficiencies and like like teamwork between players of just the result of being new. Because Hobbit, I mean, they had like 2 of those force buy rounds where he got like 3 or 4 kills with like a CZ or
CZ in such massive rounds. Yeah,
and especially on like anti-force buy or anti-eco rounds, that's usually a symptom of just like some kind of, you know, systematic failure in the theory behind what you're doing, which will take time, but then also even with that kind of a failure, you normally recover from that kind of a situation. So I don't expect they're going to be losing to too many of those moving forward into the future with just one player getting 3 kills with a CZ.
Yeah, I would just
God.
Although, fuck the CZ. I thought we were done with this shit. Like, why has this come back into my fucking
Moses,
life? Why? What the fuck, Duncan?
You know, one of my favorite things, okay, is that people use what I think is like literally the logic of a developmentally disabled person, which is that what they say is something can't be OP if someone didn't exploit it now. So here's the thing, okay? The reason why I think the CZ, the letter is Z, I've made that point many times, CZ, the reason why I think the CZ is OP, I've always made, you notice that it's always when it's in relation to the Tech9 and CZ that I always make this point, is because you have to look at how it would work if 3 people had it and did something with it. If someone has 1 CZ, I think the gun's actually pretty balanced. You know, it's one and done. The person, if they have a rifle, if you miss, they will kill you. You can't reload. You can't swap to something. It's a fucking nightmare. You can't reload takes forever. So, but if 3 people have CZs and they both play close up and cover an angle as a crossfire, what's the odds one of them isn't getting this kill? Yeah. You know what I mean? So the problem was, in the last 6 months, people all used a Tech9 if they're on the terrorist side, which is a very different type of weapon. People used a Deagle and a CZ. I think it's when you go to now where you see people, you know, when people now, okay, here's an interesting point. I've noticed a lot of teams have done the evolution we talked about that Astralis did a few months ago, which is that they don't do the full force buy with like the pistol and armor and a smoke or a flash. They do the force buy where it's actually just it's just a save, basically. You just do a save, but you buy whichever your favorite OP pistol is. You don't buy armor usually. One of you buys armor or the other doesn't, and you're saving, but you just have a good gun. Now in that scenario, everyone is actually playing what I think are very efficient strats. Like you do 2 people pushed up, you do a peek, and then the other person peeks out. So it makes the CZ seem OP as fuck, right? You can always get a couple of kills, it feels like.
Yeah. It also, I mean, I just think it's hilarious. It just shows how broken the fucking Tech9 was for so long. And as soon as it gets a little bit of a nerf, like everyone just switches right over to the CZ. It's just like,
The tech is horrible now.
It was genius, though, because the way they nerfed it, Mauisnake, is they said, no, I've buffed it. I've made it so it's more accurate. And you were like, more accurate? In your brain, you're going...
terrorists don't even do, standing still.
You go, wait a minute, in my brain, more accurate? That must be better. And then when you use it, you go, oh, wait a minute, the whole point of this gun was to move. That's genius. You actually nerfed it, but you made every idiot like, well, there's no point complaining about it. It's better, right?
It's almost better for CTs to have it now. If a CT could have a Tech9 now, it's not bad now.
Put it this way, we've had a couple of months with this now, right? We've had a couple of tournaments. I haven't seen a single clip where someone like a proper pro player on T side runs around and whatever firing technique gets like 3 really big Tech9 kills. That hasn't happened. No. It's actually, they balanced the gun. I mean, they haven't. I mean, by the way, that's when is Valve listening? Yeah, they've balanced the gun now. Really good job. Privately, no one's using it. Awesome.
Yeah, right. Didn't they do it the same with the 5.7? Didn't they make the 5.7 like more accurate when it's standing still or something like that?
Yeah, the moving accuracy is worse now. Mm-hmm.
That's a shame. I liked that gun.
Yeah, it was pretty
that's
cool.
another pistol.
CZs.
How did we not see like more 5.7 people using 5.7s on the CT side? That gun was so fucking killer.
Yeah, it was insane actually. Standing accuracy was already really good, and then moving is just like, okay, this is so broken.
Yeah.
One shot headshots are just stupid.
I've always said, like, that unfortunately, most of the time period I'm talking about here was A, the Force Buy era, and B, Tech9 or CZ being OP. But I've always said the ultimate shame of CSGO is that we had those OP pistols. Because I'm telling you, if you'd only had the USP, the 5.7, a Glock, and then some kind of terrorist version of a 5.7, players like fucking Shocks, etc., would have done insane shit. If they could only go between a USP and a 5.7, that was like their version of an upgraded pistol. Think about how many insane skilled rounds we would have had. Not people just spraying into the side of someone with a Tech9. We'd have had some bananas. And by the way, you could have done a lot tactically with that as well. You can have a guy long range with a 5.7. You can have someone up close. You can do so much with it.
Tech9 just took so much like the imagination out of T-side when your back was against the wall. It's like you don't need to think of some like masterful stroke execute to get onto sides. Like, let's just get Tech9 armor. Let's get out there.
Just rush.
Okay, I've got a question then, because what this actually ties into essentially is, so I started out asking, does CSGO benefit it? At the moment, one thing I love is you notice teams aren't just force buying to oblivion right now. That doesn't seem to currently work that much in the meta. So did these OP pistols play into loose playing style, do you think?
Ask Immortals that they just still force like a motherfucker.
Yeah, they're also not that good. So, you know, no matter what.
They haven't been making the best decisions lately.
No.
And that's a team who made it second at the majors. If anything, if they're the fucking case for force buy, I feel like they might have made that case for me. Okay.
No, I think part of it, I think it stemmed a lot from, I think it was like a progression where teams started using the Deagles more when the Deagles started becoming more and more popular. And then people realized they can just use the Deagles very far back. And if you're going to play them very far, well, I mean, that's how you use them. But like eventually people just said, what's the point of getting armor? I'm only going for like the 1D headshots anyways, so I'll just shoulder peek and take a shot and don't really need armor for that. If I get the 1D, it's great. If not, oh well. And then I think the progression has just slowly gotten there. And I think the crazy thing is it's fucking G2 that I've noticed it more out of than anyone is that they're the teams like being really, really smart with their economy right now. They have got like a great system going on where they're not force buying, where they're not doing stupid shit, where they are buying pistols with no armor, and where they are properly taking a save when they're up 5 rounds and they're at $3,200. It's fucking great to see.
No,
dude, Shocks. Oh, sorry.
I have a quick point to just throw in.
Yeah,
which is that after that tournament, I don't know if you saw this tweet, but I think Yanko or something said some comment about along these lines about the fact that they'd saved all the time and there's no force buys from G2. Because when I watched that tournament, dude, I was so happy. Not because they won, just watching them play. Like they won so many games there that would have been like a close borderline loss from having full gun rounds because they did this really smart economical management. And so afterwards, Yanko made a joke like, no more force buys from G2. And Smith's made a comment where, again, unfortunately, I don't know him personally, so I don't know if he was joking, but he'd said something like, well, of course we didn't do force buys. We lost all the pistol rounds. So don't worry, the force buy will return. And I was like, oh, fuck, Because I reckon I could literally sit those guys down and to use the old Bill Hicks line, I could prove to them with an Etch-a-Sketch why that actually won them the tournament using real and economical management. It set Kenny us up to have all the AWPs to be the fucking MVP. They actually played smart. By the way, they already have some sick players on rounds where you have like a very low econ buy, but it's an OP pistol. They have everything suited in their toolkit to be very good doing this, but you have to keep doing it though.
They did it at E-League. Back to it. They did it at E-League as well. It was great. Okay. It was fucking beautiful to watch. It's a couple of years late, I feel, but we got there.
There's still time. There's still time to turn it all around.
But yeah, I think teams just overall being a little more smart with that, despite how powerful the pistols are. I think that's also, we have to say, maybe one of the things that Valve has done good, even if it's accidental or inadvertent, is with the fact that they've nuked or nerfed the Tech9, so it's not, you can't move with it. As like a terrorist team specifically, there's no great options. You get a Deagle or you get a CZ, but you don't really have an option to just do a smoke stride in a bomb site and just explode and run around, because the CZ doesn't have the bullets to make it work. It only has 12, and those go quick. And the Deagle isn't great at entering into bomb sites like the Tech-9 was. So, there are ways to do it. It's just a lot more difficult. So I think teams are going away from force buying now.
And the UMP got nerfed as well.
Yeah.
I think Gambit have a good way of using their T-side like structure. They just give Adren a Deagle, but then everyone else gets CZs, and it's just like Adren make space, get a pick, and then everyone else fill in that map. Like wherever, if he gets that pick outside, like he always does with the Deagle. He's done that like in every tournament he's ever played.
Listen, I don't know how Gambit still stayed good. Fucking Fitch. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, Fitch is just the most like clutch pickup ever. It's like electronic. Just out of nowhere. Such a sick player.
What were you going to say before, Max? Did you have some point to springboard onto?
Not really.
Well, fair enough. See,
give us something.
Pro tip there. What you do is, even if you don't, you lie, because I just basically said, your turn to shine. You were like, no, I'm all right, you go ahead.
I don't want the ball. I don't want the ball.
Honesty will get you nowhere in this business, son. As the Twitters of certain players will show you. Sometimes, don't say what you actually think and feel. Lie.
Prove it. Oh, no. Well, if you're going to add on to the Gambit point, I think it is just insane how much Zeus has just like his like afterlife presence on Gambit after he's gone to Na'Vi is still stuck there. Like they still have like Hobbit, because when Hobbit joined Gambit, he just like wasn't at the level he was. And then even though Zeus sort of is the one that built him up and gone, his like skill level hasn't dropped. He's maintained, which has showed that like he's just a legitimately good player now. He wasn't one that was being like micromanaged by Zeus or anything. I think that's an important thing to know.
I mean, that's also an element where I actually get quite pissed off with some players where, okay, I think Fallen's the most extreme example of this, where in being the in-game leader, you've also in a way sort of like literally coached players. Like you've sort of trained them like, this is the way we're going to think, this is the way we're going to play. And obviously that will carry on. You know, you'll have that influence that you had on them could extend long beyond that. But then as a result, what happens is, like, I'll give you an example. If Gambit was to win a tournament tomorrow, like say they won, they're not at E-League, I think. I'm trying to think what tournaments they're at. Let's say they won a huge tournament. It has to be a big one, right? Say everyone said what we're saying now, like, oh, you can still kind of see the presence of Zeus there and some of his DNA still in the team and Hobbit. God, that is a terrible rumor. I don't know where you've heard that from, but it's a lie. Oh, wait. It was a metaphor, was it, right? So when they say something like that, right, they'll get really mad and be like, no, it isn't. You know, we did this all ourselves. That, I think players often misunderstand that. They don't realise. I'm not literally saying Fallen controlled your whole brain the whole round. What I'm saying is he kind of explained the concept to you. It made sense. You were able to take it on yourself and do it. But in a weird way, you have to give him a little bit of credit still. There's something to that, to how it works in a team, I feel.
Yeah, I
Crickets.
think they still have some of the confidence left over. I think all those like roommate situations with Zeus and Hobbit, like Hobbit got so much confidence from rooming with Zeus.
I know, but Moses would say that was like he was kind of like a bigger brother or a father-son relationship. I think it's more like
just patting him on the back all night.
You know, in ancient Greece,
you can do it.
The way that you used to get trained in ancient Greece was you would get a mentor figure who would train you in a very specific. He would train you in the classics, in literature, in mathematics, and there was a special technique you had to form a very close bond with you and make sure that you were kind of like pair bonded with him for a while. So,
Papa Bear.
All I'm going to say, it worked. Listen, all I'm saying is this. Maybe that's why no one's been able to get through to Simple. We need someone, dude. We need some mad stud to just come in. And it's like, well, practice time. Where's everyone else though, coach? Never you mind. So, okay, here's a question. Max, what is your favorite example of like a loose playing style, but like it can't just be like completely brute force, but it's got like some nuance to it. It's got something to what's like, which one do you think? Give me one that worked.
Well, obviously Mouse, sort of at this most recent PSG. I think they had a really sick ability to just like get Chris J out in front of the pack and then just really just work off him and entry and trade really effectively. I thought Sunny was especially good at that, especially. And obviously Oscar with the X Factor as well.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about that example is, because Lurpus obviously knows Sunny because they're Finnish, and like if you've ever met anyone Finnish, right, first of all, even if they speak English, they will never come and speak to you. You must go and speak to them. And secondly, even when they have good English, so they're so antisocial, a lot of them will just like pretend they don't speak English. So as a result, since Lopez has insight with the team, actually I know that that's a team that didn't have time to practice basically. So they just won a whole tournament where Virtus Pro and SK and Team Liquid and Gambit were there. They won a tournament like that, essentially just sort of playing kind of a PUG style on the T side. No. And they won by, if you watch the tournament, they won all of T sides pretty much. Until it got to, I think, like Nuke on the last match. Everything else was you had to win the T side. And when you would watch it, yes, like you're saying, Chris J basically almost played like a fucking entry player.
Yeah, he just was running out, yeah.
He would run out, and then what would happen is, if Oscar has an AWP, Oscar does wherever he wants, like literally push anywhere on the map with an AWP, and then Sonny, like, dude, I actually think Sonny is set to be like one of the stars of CS, because when I watched him in this team and in Penta, he will push up to an area, and he will like just take over, but then he never like pushes beyond. Like he's one of the best players I've seen at abusing, where you have like you hold an advanced angle. Like you hold an advanced angle where the CTs come into the site and you just kill everyone who thinks like, well, either the guy's there and he's going to push you and kill me, or there's no one there. He like exploits that loop in people's expectation of where you can be on the map. And somehow on the T side, the amount of kills he gets doing that is ridiculous.
Yeah. Rops is also so clutch.
Yeah, I was about to say, Robs is just insane.
Robs is probably one of the more promising, like, younger talents we have at the moment. I think he's really, really good. We actually have a decent amount of like young talent though, like the Robs, HS. I think Twist for Liquid is pretty promising. Who else is there? Sonny obviously is a big one as well.
I was thinking if I should let this go. Listen, a lot of those names, good names. I'm going to go ahead and call it right now. That HS guy is not going to work out, and he's absolutely not going to be a star player. I've watched that guy play a few times, and he is the ultimate example of the person who only shoots the first 3 people in the head with 1 bullet or does nothing. Like, I'm going to tell you that, right? That's my call, okay? I could be totally wrong. Since no one else fucking takes shots, I can only be wrong, and you guys all just pick whoever is good and go, I think he is good. And then everyone goes, well done, you have said the thing we are all supposed to say, you know about Counter-Strike. But I'm going to go ahead and be bold and say, I already know they only got that HS guy because they kept going down a fucking phone book of players, and they were like at the end, well, he's available, so they had to get him. Secondly, like when I just saw him playing that Penta team, like I say, he just was basically he's the guy where anytime he hit, people saw it and were like, wow, what a talent. But then I watched a lot of the rounds where nothing happened, and I was like, I don't really know where he goes, man. And the reason why here's the second factor I'll say. The other reason I think he will fail in the Optic team is because they don't have a traditional in-game leader. So it's not like I don't see who they have who could change him and develop him. At the moment, they have Freiburg, who's literally just going to start learning now. So that's like, for me, with young players, unless they're already kind of complete, like their playing style set, you don't want someone to be learning from someone who himself is learning how to be an in-game leader. That's like trying to take classes from someone who's like, wait there a minute, I've just done day 1 of my own degree course. Like, what the fuck's this? Like, and he's coming home every night like, I think the teacher said to do this. And then they're like,
I don't think you can completely discount Armorpet and his impact that he can have on the Optic squad, especially with the younger guys. But I don't know how, like...
Wait a minute, did you say you can discount it or you can't?
You can't. Like, I feel like he's an insanely intelligent and smart.
It's the accent. It's the accent, Doug.
Okay,
I heard.
Wait, I've got a question. I've got a follow-up then, okay? So here's the thing. So here's the thing. I'm a pet. It's a very accurate name because that guy is not a wild animal. He would never bite you or attack you. He sits there, he waits for you to approach him and gently stroke him. Now, the problem with that is you say that. Like, listen, I agree. If you took some of these players and you had that guy run up kind of... Remember, his strengths really came when he was the analyst. Run up, like, lots of game demo stuff and tell him, like, listen, these are the areas you're getting, like, low percentage plays from. Here's where you could get a lot of success. Yeah, maybe that could really work. But that also relies on him being, like, authority figure and the player being open to it, you know. In CLG, at least he had FNS. That's like a conduit to get your ideas into the team. If the coach and the in-game leader are on the same page, you can do a lot. I have no clue what he could do in Optic.
It's hard to say.
I know from early returns, I've talked a little bit to the Optic guys, and they've enjoyed what he's provided. It's still early going. I don't know how much they're using it, but it's basically like, I mean, the guy inhales demos and just like writes everything down. Like, yeah, brilliant. I mean, he just gives them all the information. So, no matter who you are, you can use that to a certain degree.
You mean you walk into the bathroom and you're like, who's in there? And then when the door like busts open, right, he's just like on the toilet. He's got his phone out and he's got an Astralis demo and he goes, even Heisenberg math wasn't this pure. He inhales demos, Moses. That must be like the shit for him. That shit blew. That's all I'm going to tell you. That shit blew. Okay, Max, let me ask you something. I got a vibe there. Do you know this guy personally? Are you like friends with him? Are you trying to secretly big him up without expressing it?
No, I just admire like just that intensive, just sit down, pour over demos and like pick out the tendencies and like feed them to star players. I think that's a really powerful way to enable individual talent to grow. And if they already have that like personality there where they're not overbearing or dominant, especially if it's like you said, he's maybe a bit more pensive and not willing to like push his agenda.
Who's touching their mic right now, by the way? Probably Moses.
What the fuck?
What were you going to say, Mauisnake?
I was doing that. I don't know. One thing I think HS might get swept under the rug for on this Optic team is that there's kind of like flaws with like Magisk Boy that needed to be like taken into account first. So and and Olu always has to be in the right position and whatnot. So I'm a Pet's gonna like look at how do we set up our opper and how do we set up who's supposed to be like kind of one of the star players on this. So Magisk Boy, like one of the reasons I felt like North was never going far with him was that he always played these kind of like in a 5v5, he'll play this like really selfish kind of like forward one and done kind of position. And I think that's going to be one of the focuses of Imapet's criticism on this Optic team right now. I haven't seen enough to know if he's still doing this, but it was definitely something that you can't have a really consistent team with when one of your like main firepower guys is always just like getting a kill and dying in the very beginning of the round. He'll get his stats and walk away from it like, oh, I got 100 ADR or whatever, because yeah, you played a one and done, but you're not surviving, you're not helping the team, and you're creating a 4v4 for our team that's like not really beneficial to us in the long run. So hopefully HS just gets some attention as well.
Okay. Hopefully hits those first 3 bullets, Duncan?
Yeah.
Exactly. So here's the thing. When you talk about this aspect, actually, this is something else I think plays into it. Like if you notice every single example that we've given of like either a loose or like a semi-loose team that worked and was very good, nearly all of them have, at the time, the consensus best player in the world on the team. And so one element of the loose style and why you run that is kind of like what I alluded to before. You're kind of giving the star a lot of what he wants. You're kind of saying to him, you to some degree get to define how we play the game. And I can tell you, it's the exact same in almost every pro sport I know. Whoever has the best player in the world tends to run the whole offense through that guy. Like he gets to, because he's going to know better than anyone how to set himself up in a way, right? He's going to know, right, I went to this situation, it didn't work, but you know what? If you let me go again, I know like what adjustment to make or what tweak to make, and then I'll get the favorable situation for me. And so the in-game leader can know a bit of that from learning it, but since he's never going to know quite as well on that specific, he's willing to create a hole in the system where it's like, right, you do something here, and then I kind of respond with that. I make the next play off that.
Yeah, what made SK so successful before is that it was very clear that coldzera was the star. So everyone's just like, the whole make space for the star there is just, let's just do a strat and like get into this bomb site, and coldzera is going to clutch it out 1v2, 1v3, it doesn't matter. But now since there's this like kind of battle for alpha on SK, I don't know how the inner workings really are, but it seems like if Fur is trying to be a star here, then if your star is dying first in the round and doesn't have like an insane... If your star is an entry and his first kill differential isn't like insane, then you're not really working off of your star there, and that's maybe what's happening right now. Also, Phelps is trying to still carve his like little niche on this team and whatnot. Yeah.
I mean, that's yeah. Go ahead.
So I think it just in the long run it makes sense to, if your star is like a really clutch player, kind of like almost support in a way, then you're gonna have like Device, for example, Zipnix, also very clutch players. They aren't really making a lot of openings in the beginning. I mean, Device will sometimes find picks in the beginning of the round, but Zipnix was always there to finish out rounds and whatnot in E-League Major. So if the star is just like a last alive kind of guy, but he already got a lot of space because the entries and the other people in front of him were so selfless to get into that site, then it just works off of them a lot better, and you're gonna see more consistent results because Clutch is like, you don't always need to win the aim duels. You just need to make the right decisions a lot of the time. You need to make the right peaks. You need to have the right timing, have really good movement too. But yeah.
Well, going on from the Device thing, I actually interviewed Glaive at IM Sydney and I asked him that question. I was like, how do you see your team? Do you see it as like a mixture? Do you assign more resources and room to the people you think of as stars? And he essentially said, oh, well, the only player that I give more room or time to in my calling and how I think is Device, and that's just because he's the AWPer. He's like, I don't actually look at my team as a group of stars, which I found really interesting because I would think that, I know that when you have players like Device and Kyobi and Zipnix in the late round and stuff like that, I think as an in-game leader, you'd probably prioritize your star players a bit more in that sense.
I mean, that's just philosophy, though, isn't it? Because Astralis really does have that logic of like, since we think we are playing the smartest Counter-Strike, it should work. So if everyone falls back on that, it should work. I mean, I'm trying to think what point I was going to make there.
You had a good one. It feels like you had a really good point.
Let me think. Oh, I know what it was now. So actually, if you notice, even the ones I listed as very extreme, like the Fnatic with Dennis one, because I kind of tempered them by pointing out, like, well, in a weird way, at the time you could make a point, right? That at the time, Olaf Meister, if it was like traditional sports, okay, so in the NFL you have an offensive coach and you have a defensive coach, and sometimes you have a head coach above that. There's a guy where he's specialist on knowing what we do offensively. In a way, Olaf Meister was like the offensive coach of that team. He knows all the plays. Everything was triggered by him. He actually probably makes the initial decision, and then Pronex makes a read off it, like, right, here's how we support what we just did there, right? That's like, you do have some level of structure. It's coming from disparate sources, but then they're kind of the mini in-game leader in that one respect. I'll tell you actually what, if I really think of like the most ridiculous example ever, I actually think in CSGO it would be the Mousesports that had Nico, because when he was the in-game leader, like, forget Stewie 2K and Shocks and all the rest of it. Yes, they did call around themselves, but they were like, right, here's what I like to do, but then here's what you can do. When Nico was the in-game leader, it felt like he literally was like, you four are basically pawns that are set up to let me get all the kills that I know I can get. And he literally, like, if you saw, Nico's style of players, he's like quite a slow-paced player, and he like has perfect position. That's how Mousesports played every T side. They would just like, he would send people forwards, they would check the angle, he would come in, and like, it worked for him. Because listen, he's a very young player at the time, he'd never been an in-game leader before. He did the best he could do from that, but that also was a style that, like, there was nowhere else that could go. He'd taken that to the very limit of what was even possible with that. And then obviously those players were in no sense good enough to make that work enough that you could ever win. Put your hand in front of the camera quickly, Max, because it's gone out of focus. Right, if you pull it back now, it should come back in. Put it right in front. Yeah, there we go, it worked. Right, it worked already, mate. Yeah. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Do you remember the Mousesports with Nico?
Yeah, Nico.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because this is where me and, by the way, Yanko have a big parting, which is that Yanko used to get really mad and be like, look how stupid they're playing and they're not doing it right. And I was like, Yanko, mate, I realize you look at the team and you think logically that this guy should know this. None of those players know that. Nico is the best thing about that team, and this is the only way it's getting any level of success, is he has to literally be like, I know one player in this team who could play at this level. Let's all do what he thinks. Oh, is that me? Then let's continue,
I always found it.
Where were you going with that? Come on.
I always just found it so weird that, he they had so many different play styles in that Mousesports team. They had like Nico being like the hard carry essentially for that team and using everyone else to put himself in position. Then they had the era where I think it was towards the end of his tenure in Mousesports, he was in a little, I don't know if I'd call it a slump, but like he consciously took more passive roles to try and let everyone else do what they wanted to try and get them more engaged, and maybe he'd be able to help out in the mid rounds, but he wasn't the one initiating, and that was probably when they looked the worst. And then when he eventually left the team, all the players did better. So like it was just like the weirdest thing to me, that team could never get going, because you saw when Nico leaves, Dennis all of a sudden was a baller, but like where was he when Nico was just passive throughout all the rounds?
Right. Definitely wasn't a baller, but I acknowledge that your hyperbole means he wasn't a pure, abject black hole. Yes, I agree. Definitely wasn't a baller. Let's just be frank, okay?
All right, he played much better. He played much better.
Yes.
Definitely workable.
But that's like what you'd expect if like Nico literally was like as an in-game leader just playing passively and just saying everyone else take the fights you want, like set up across the map and get the fights. Like how is that any different from them not having Nico and just having a different in-game leader? It's the same kind of concept. So I always found that like very, very strange. But like Mousesports tried everything. They tried like more structure when Nico was passive. They tried looser when Nico was more aggressive. So I don't know, just a weird scenario. And it also just goes to show you if you are going to play a loose play style, like you either have to have the best player in the world, at playing at his peak performance, and that's barely good enough to get you out of groups. And then otherwise, you just have to have an insane amount of talent spread across the map.
Well, yeah, see, that's the difference between Mousesports and other teams is that when you play like a loose style as a G2 or whatever, at least you have the talent there to like actually open up the sites. Whereas if Nico goes down in Mouse when they're playing that super loose style, then it's like, how do you bully around another top European team when you have like Dennis as the one leading the pack or something like that?
Yeah, because I have to say, like, first of all, if you remember when they started to make the swap, where I think Chris Jabit was like moving to be the in-game leader at the time, and they had Lowell came into the team, if you remember when they cut Nex, they actually initially had a little burst where, if you remember, they won their E-League group, which was the one with Cloud9 and Immortals, and then they went to ESEA. They went to ESL Pro League, and they made top 4, right? So what's great is it was one of the ultimate moments. It's delicious. Because what happened was every fan was like, see, this is the correct way to play. It's more tactical. Do you remember what happened from that semi-final onwards, though? They lost 10 maps in a row on LAN. Now, that never happened any time during the Nico era, when they had Nico and Nex. Never, ever happened. But they should. Because guess what? Like Moses is saying here, if you have your star player, who, by the way, the whole team was succeeding off of, not even play the style that he is really good at, or even maybe the positions he's really good at, and then he's like, you know what? My problem is I'm too selfish. Time to set this guy up and give him the ball. And he is a not very good player. You're probably going to be fucking garbage as a team, aren't you? That's why I love the fact that to this day, people still were pushing that narrative of like, see, Mouse without Nico is really good. It's like every time they said that, it was never the same Mouse. It was never the same setup. Like, they changed players. Like that, like, it doesn't matter how much you want to force a narrative. There has to be some basis in reality,
Yeah, it was like when Simple left Flipside, like the 2 months after that, just did fuck all until eventually, I can't remember, there was a move. Oh, hey, don't talk shit about my boy Blade like that. I fucking love that guy. I wrote a piece about him. I think he's sick. I
like Blade. Yeah, he gets a lot out of very little, but they literally don't do anything all year.
Yeah, that's fair.
I meant that in the literal
most ridiculous
sense.
way. Yeah. Just the most ridiculous way to call a team in the best way possible and the worst way possible at the same time.
I always think it's so weird. He really does call based off numbers, right? Like when they go into bomb sites, each quadrant or something like that. Is that the team I'm thinking of, Duncan?
Yeah, that was the problem, is that some of the tactics he was calling, apparently like Bondic would be like, I can't do partial differential math. He's like, what do you mean? You read papers I give you, yes? Meanwhile, Simple was just like, equals me. Equals me. They're like, no, it doesn't Simple. Yeah, it all equals me. Simple's like theory of relativity. Yes. Simple's theory of relativity is WIN equals me, and the me is capitalized. Mauisnake,
fucking hell.
Can you think of a prominent team that had a loose style that we haven't brought up yet? Is there a good example you could give us?
Immortals,
I think,
kind of be like that.
Yeah, I'd best say Immortals, but they're like so default heavy, and then they sort of like work off that. And then I guess you can also talk about Cloud9 and
the old Cloud9, yeah. Or this one. Which one? This one or the previous? Which one? This one or the previous?
What's that?
Which one? What?
This can't be that hard a question. Which one? This Cloud9 or the previous Cloud9? Am I Blade? Have I just started speaking fucking like
everyone? My
calculus
cuts out when other people are talking together.
So then maybe everyone shouldn't talk over each other. This is not a bar. So which one? This Cloud9?
I mean,
or the motherfucking previous one? Okay, right. This one, the one with Rosh and Tariq, because obviously. I get the feeling they will play a fairly loose style with old Mr. Peanut Brain fucking leading shit, who I love. love him as a friend, but
I mean, even the last Cloud9 was a little bit loose. They weren't the most structured team in the world, but this one definitely more so. And I mean, that could be just a product of how new the roster is. But yeah, I think it's also going to be a product of the fact that they don't have. I mean, especially if they switch over to Tarek, they're not using an experienced in-game leader. So just by nature, the newer the in-game leader, the looser the style is going to be when it starts out. Towards the end of Stewie's reign, before this roster change, they were getting a little bit more involved in the tactical side of things with slower pace systems, but yeah, this one is just going to be purely reliant on skill. It feels like. I actually still haven't watched them play a whole lot recently, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I imagine I didn't watch. Like what I mean is I didn't watch any of Montreal where they were, but I would imagine that's going to be a pretty fucking loose style moving forward.
Yeah, something they're doing right now is that they're not like, they are kind of default heavy, and they're not like really, the way they're getting map control is kind of like, here, let's just default, and we're not going to use any like Astralis, for example, is really good at using utility to flush people out to take map control. Cloud9 is kind of like, they won't use nades until they're like, oh, there's a guy there, I'm going to use it now, because like usually you're supposed to just preemptively use these things just to like push yourself forward on the map
to eliminate risk while gaining map control.
Exactly. Whereas now it's like, okay, the only time they're throwing nades is because like I know a guy's right behind this wall, I have to molly him. I'm gonna molly him out, obviously. So yeah, it's not some like crazy team Molotov strat or anything like that, or just like map control kind of positioning.
Yeah, that takes time. Unfortunately, I think like especially in North America, and I mean you probably experienced this in the Oceanic region as well, is the only way to really teach that kind of style of play is to have like a really a really good coach and a really big authority figure, which no team has. And I think if you look at the only team in North America that's actually doing that really well is Liquid, and they have Zeus, who is a very good coach and a very big authority figure within that team. So I love the utility usage seeing out of Liquid, and I think that's what Cloud9 is eventually going to need. I just don't think they have I don't think they have like the know-how, and I don't think they have the figure to really put in the work and time on like that theory that it takes to build that across all maps.
Well, the interesting thing is the part of the reason, here's the thing, right? Sometimes you just get that perfect timing where when someone makes a point, like the next matches is exactly where that sort of like bears out the point they're saying, and you can see, I can see the logic behind that. So when Liquid won early on the tournament, the first map they played in the ESG Mykonos was against Big, and they won 16-14 on Overpass, so not a map you traditionally think of Liquid as playing and being good on. And Big, actually on that type of map, I've seen them play previously, have good tactics. They actually have pretty good setup style. And when I did an interview with Nitro on the stream, I'd heard he is the in-game leader again. So obviously I wrecked him. I was like, how long will this last? Obviously you're going to change, right? You've done it so many times in the past. What's the point of this? Because again, you think of it, the whole reason Stanislaw even is in Team Liquid is he was able to parlay the idea that he was the best NA in-game leader. And what Nitro said was that he wanted to be the in-game leader, but like Stanislaw's kind of like the secondary caller. But in being the in-game leader, the reason he wanted to be the in-game leader is actually because Stanislaw, when he was the main in-game leader, couldn't really be like a lurker in the same way as he was. Like that guy who pulls off the sick rotation. He was kind of limited from doing that. So Nitro took in-game leadership in order to give that up. But also, I heard from some of the others that basically the people who do all the homework for Liquid now is Nitro and Elige. They go every night and they watch the demos of the opponent that's coming up and they figure out what they're going to do. So by the way, that means Elige is now involved in the process. He doesn't just play and have all those personality problems he had before where it's kind of like, I do my shit and then you do yours, and if we lose, well, I'm the best player, so I think we know who fucked up. Now they actually have kind of like a three-man unit that's doing all the shit, and you've got Zeus as well, who's involved with the mix and obviously is fantastic in terms of coaching and personality. So you saw in the games, by the way, it had a massive impact that they did look in all these areas very improved. So I can't at one tournament, but it was certainly massively encouraging, I would say, because...
Does it fill you with hope, Duncan?
Well, people always think that with these last couple of Team Liquid lamps, that I'm just like blowing them up for no reason, but it's like, well, no, I'm not hyping them. If you look at the line, this is real potential. They're just not tapping into it somehow. Now, I never claimed I know how to tap into it, but one of the problems for me has always been Nitro. I felt like... Like for me, ever since Simple came to that team, I've never seen Nitro ever be close to a star. And wasn't I didn't even think he was that competent when he was like a supportive player either.
Yeah, he has seemed like in this lineup that's at points he's been like seems like a little bit like the Lost Boy, right? Where like he just doesn't seem to like fill any kind of like objective purpose, which is a shame because I remember when he was one of the most exciting North American players, you know, all back, you know, this is how awesome it was. It was like 3 years ago. Yeah. You know, Simple seems to have broken people like mentally, like Kusta, Nitro. He's just like got into their brain and broke something. Did
he break them? Or was he more like the crucible in which they were found to be wanting?
Whatever. Either way, does it matter? The outcome is the same.
It is.
You know who was actually really good for Liquid from, I mean, I only watched the grand final of Mykonos as well. JDM seems to be getting back some form. No. And I'll tell you, if you want to talk about another player who does prep work, I remember walking into Cologne last year at the major and seeing JDM in like the bar, not with a beer, just sat at a table with the bar and a water, and he just had a notebook of all his opponents, and every single team had like 6 or 7 pages worth of like where their opera likes to play, all these different tactics and everything like that. So JDM is another guy who puts in not only like the time in like DMs, but he puts in like the studious hours as well.
Dude, I feel so guilty now. I've just realized that's what those teams are doing. The reason they stay up all night is they're watching demos on their laptop in the bar. We've totally mispainted them. They're actually the most dedicated players.
Yeah,
that's
what it is.
I thought,
nice. It's a cheap shot. I like it.
No, dude, maybe it goes the other way. That's what they do, right? You know, okay, there's a famous thing, okay, in Korean culture. Like, people won't realize this, but actually one of the reasons why Koreans also are really dedicated at playing games is because famously, your parents like basically put a lot of pressure on you to be really good at school. So what people would do is they'd say to their mom, "Oh, I'll go to the library now. Can I have like $5 for a drink or something?" And then they would go and they'd just go to the LAN cafe and play for 5 hours, right? Maybe what happens is, you know, because we heard FNX is like still a big influence on that team. He's like, "I better see you guys at the fucking bar at 10 p.m. and I want at least 2 tequilas down at that point in time." And then they're like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll be there." And then they're like, "Oh, we're just gonna go and we're just gonna go over here." And then they're just secretly watching games, going, "Oh, we gotta get our bloody homework done." "Oh no, FNX is coming. What are you watching?" Football? Is that a sport we do down here? Yeah, we're watching football. Anyway, you're round, I think. So, anyway, don't anyone else jump in there. You guys will not survive it. So tell me something about Counter-Strike. You get yourself out of trouble. So.
I was just going to touch on how good Stanislaw was and how he was looking on Liquid, especially in the SK series. Like, it's been a while since we've seen him put like such a big performance in against like a side like SK Gaming, and I thought he played especially well off of Nitro on sites. So sure. I think there could be something in the sort of synergy between like Stanislaw, who's obviously a very smart player in game, and Nitro calling as well. I think they had a really nice ability to play for each other, especially on Cobblestone. So
by the way, Mauisnake, did you watch ESG Mykonos? By the way, don't worry if you haven't. Like, I'm just asking you now so we know to set the table. Did you watch it?
I watched like a good amount of the games, or a decent amount.
Did you watch it as well, Max?
Yeah, like not all the games, but a fair amount.
Yeah.
Okay, because I just want to point out, by the way, like, obviously, like Moses, you didn't watch much of it, right?
I was at E-League.
No, he was doing E-League. So by the way, I don't want to make that the main topic because it means Moses has to just like guess on some of the shit. So when I asked this question, he obviously didn't necessarily watch the game that Team Liquid had when they beat SK. So in this series, okay, Fur had massive problems. And in general at this tournament, he wasn't very good. And I know that because of the way him and Phelps fucked that round up against G2 at Malmo, people at the moment are actually going in on Fur pretty fucking hard. And they're all using the logic of like, oh, he's just too aggro with CT and he just pushes out stupidly. Like, I don't want to make this too black and white, but if you don't like what he's doing now, how could you ever accept it and say it was great when they win all those tournaments?
It's just results-oriented thinking.
Because that guy was the most... Yeah. Like, I agree. That's why JW is actually a very good example, Moses. I've never looked at JW's like mad pushes that he used to do on CT and gone, that's logically sound. But if it works, I can't really diss it too much, can I? I can do it a little bit like fundamentally it's not sound. But if you keep making it work, I have to give you props. But people are going the other way now. It's like suddenly it was fine when he was doing it and wrecking every team. Because by the way, if you were a team like Astralis and you're trying to set up for like a slow banana push and then he comes out like that and kills 2 of you, you're going to think, what a genius, he killed 2 people. No, that's terrible. Like, he might have done that off no information, might have done it blind, maybe he just went super aggro. But like, I have real problems if people then are too results orientated in that sense. You know, you can't just draw such a straight line down it. But I do want to know though what people's thoughts are. Like, what's happened to SK? Because it has now been 4 tournaments since SK even made the final of a tournament. Think of that.
I think the break might have thrown off some other, like, I don't know, body language is kind of weird with that team. Before, even when Phelps was like, well, I keep going back to him, but like I just noticed things about him a lot because I'm interested in his style. But he seemed to, like, they played off each other a little better before, and now, like, this is body language. Like, every time I see him talk into his microphone, he's always like just like, okay, here's a call. Like, okay, I'm kind of seeing this right here.
Wait a minute, like, why is he talking like a fucking gangster from the 1920s? Like, okay, see, hey, man, what you doing?
He's like, all right, okay. And it's like, I feel like there might be some kind of disconnect that happened in the break, something. Like, I don't know if these guys are friends or what, like. And this is just going off the rails, but I don't know if they really like are hanging out with each other or like doing anything in their free time. I know like VP at least play like PUBG together or something, like while they're warming up or something, but like, I don't know. It's maybe just like they're not playing off each other in the same masterclass style that they were before.
Virtus Pro plays PUBG.
Like Snacks was playing it, then it was his birthday at one of those lands. Then what? Pasha took over.
Because that would explain a lot, right?
Game or something.
No wonder they would think PUBG is a really fun game to play. Because in their mind, they're like, "Well, we always survive, right? Wait a minute, how did I die? No one ever gets cut or killed. No, I always survive. Like our lineup always survives." So then they were like, "No, actually, 900 other people could win the game as well." Fucking hell, what's this? Now I have to try and keep 900 people down, like the entire Polish scene. I should have done that. I could have done that joke better, couldn't I? What I should have said was they're really good at PUBG because they're used to keeping 900 people down and stopping them getting to the top. The Polish scene. ... Sorry, I'll edit that. Yeah, so that's exactly. Don't worry. Luckily, none of you said anything good during it. I'll edit that. Don't worry.
Just another thing to touch on with SK. I think they.
By the way, if you ever have a good point to make. Just make the good point, because in that scenario there, right, when you said like just another point, well, my point was a dead end. So just keep going. Yeah.
Okay. Well, like they had so much momentum throughout like the pre-PGL major. They just had like so many events in a row, and they were like constantly moving from one event to another, and just like, okay, we won this tournament. We're like, let's focus on this best of 3 matchup against Faze or Astralis or whoever the top team is. And it just felt like maybe after the break, they lost whatever that was, like the thing that kept driving them forward together as a team, like moving in airports together and planes together, and like their sole thing was just to play CS. It's just like, I don't know how you necessarily get back to that same level of just super focused, all about team play thing after a big break.
You better hope they figure it the fuck out, because pretty much by the time October starts, there's a Counter-Strike tournament every single week until Christmas. So if they're going to be going to all those...
There's a big break after New York, isn't there? Like in terms of top tier events.
I think there's like 2 weeks off, and then it's the E-League playoffs, and then there's like and then it's Epicenter, and then there's rumored to be Star Ladder, and then I think there's like a 1 week break there,
EPL
and then it goes Oakland to Blast Pro to DreamHack Winter to EPL finals to ECS finals, and then that's like December 15th or something like that.
Because here's the thing, okay, that's why I love Counter-Strike. Because it's a dose of reality every single week or two for a team. Like, you can't ever live in a delusional world where you think, we're really good, but you never get tested until I play. Like, I'll give you the best example. This is why League of Legends system is absolute garbage. Like, when they do their LCS season, okay, what literally would happen every fucking season is, remember, you're in a league with like 10 teams, okay? So like within our scene, imagine the top two, let's say there's 3 top teams that are very good and everyone else is like, some of them are middling, some of them are really bad. What would literally happen at every LCS split is one of the top teams kind of isn't that legit, but they're still ranked, say, like 3rd or something. And you think, that's still pretty good. And what would happen is you look on the calendar for when they play the other top teams. So they get that big matchup. It's the big game. They fuck up. They do badly. They lose. But then the next 3 weeks, they play teams in the middle and the bottom, and they beat those teams up. And dude, people would tell the story as though they weren't playing different teams. People would be like, well, they had troubles in week 3, but they bounced back in week 4 and 5. They were really good and they're really strong. And then what would happen is you'd finally get to the playoffs, like 2.5 months in. You'd fail outright in the big series. You'd lose. And essentially, in your entire split, one series defined how you did. And at the end, people will be like, well, this is a great system. Let's do this over and over again. You'd only have 2 of those per year. Whereas in CS, if you have 3 bad weeks, 3 tournaments in a row that are bad, something's going to change, I guarantee you. Something like small is going to change from tournament to tournament, and something radical is going to change if you're a big team and you have that many in a row, you know. Like, things are going to change. That's a good thing. It's like an error-correcting component, I feel like.
For sure. But then it's just like, what do you do if you're a team like Mouse, who just comes off this massive win of ESG and they're not playing till like mid-October? Like, can you...
No, they're playing E-League. They're going this week. No, wait a minute. It's ESL New York, actually. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It's ESL New York.
Oh, yeah. ESL New York, they're missing.
And I think it's E-League after that, though. I think E-League's
they're playing E-League after that. Okay, fair.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the schedule is too crazy. I think we'd see a return to normalcy if we had the ability to have some breaks for the teams and the players to go back and fix issues.
I'll take care of that. Okay, right. I'd just like to make an announcement.
I know all teams get to choose which events they like to go to.
No. Moses would just like all event organizers that are going to hire him to cancel their events, and we'll just have the other events be the circuit. Problem solved. I think that's fair. Let's make some space.
That's exactly what I said.
EPL, IEM, E-League, please close down all operations. Allow DreamHack, ECS, and StarLadder to run their tournaments.
No, I get it. I know it's a business. I know it's not going to happen, but it would be nice if there was some kind of a break at some point. Like, by the way, this past weekend was absolutely fucking retarded with Counter-Strike. We had E-League, we had Mykonos, and then we had Montreal. Yes. That's way too fucking much for a weekend.
Right. Counterpoint. Are you ready? That's the name of the show, Counterpoints. Are you ready for a counterpoint?
It's going to be terrible, but yeah. Let's do it.
It isn't. So in 2016 and 2017, if you had to pick out a 2-month period where the worst Counter-Strike was played, which would you have picked in 2016 and 2017? There's only one answer.
I would say
after the player break.
Yeah, but we had like 5 fucking teams change rosters right after the major. It's not the break, it's the roster changes.
And also the coaching role. Like, there was heaps of...
Wait a minute. But last year there wasn't loads of roster changes after the player break.
What do you mean?
Last year's player break, Moses, was in August. I don't know if you're aware of that. And afterwards, the whole CS scene went to shit, where everyone placed different placings for the next 8 tournaments, all because teams didn't play for 3 weeks. I think, here's my counterpoint. It's bad. I want teams to either make the hard choice and really carve out time if they need it. Otherwise, I actually don't think having that much time off is good. Like, I think you look at all the teams now, most of them are bad. Like, almost no one's playing top potential as far as I can tell.
No, but I mean, it's also, I think the competition in general has raised, so no team ever looks that great anymore. Like, I think we're done with the eras of Counter-Strike where there's going to be 1 or 2 dominant teams and everyone else just kind of fights to try and get to third and maybe upset them once in a while. I think that time period in Counter-Strike is just done.
Homie, it was this summer.
What's that?
It was this summer.
What? That was the summer?
SK won 5 out of 6 tournaments.
Yeah, but I mean, that's always going to be, you know, they had a good run. Like, I don't know what you want. Like, now they look like crap. Now they look like shit. I don't think this is going to be a situation where we have it lasting for a year. Like, Astralis is going to be good for 2 to 3 months. You know, Virtus Pro is good for 2 months. And then I think that's more of what we're going to get. And the only reason SK won so many tournaments is because they had 5 major tournaments fall into their 2 to 3 month peak. And now what we're seeing is they dip down, and we're going to see other teams competing. And I mean, I don't know. That's just the way I think. And I think it's always been hilarious to me. I remember when the players first kind of started talking about, like, they got this 3-week or 4-week player break in August. Like, they're like, oh yeah, August is the player break. We did it. We succeeded. And I'm like, great. You still have 330 days during the rest of the year where you're essentially just playing Counter-Strike as a fucking, you know.
Well, here's another counterpoint. Okay. I actually would totally agree with this concept of players being way too overworked if we lived in the world that Thorin likes, where every tournament's all the best teams. But actually, here's another counterpoint. What gives you a break is everyone who doesn't get invited runs a massive chance of not even fucking qualifying for the LAN. You know how many times now the new Gambit and G2 have failed to qualify for LAN since the play? Yeah, so that's just giving them a break right there, you know. The problem is this, okay, Moses. I will agree that the part that I worry about is a lot of those teams, it's like they get an itchy trigger finger and they're like, shit, we haven't been invited. We've got a whole month off. Find some LAN that we'd have never attended and sign up for that and try and win it. It's like, that's where things go wrong, you know. Like think about this. I realize this is a different example because obviously everyone just had a break. But I'm actually amazed SK signed up for the ESG Mykonos tournament. Like, dude, if you take SK off the billing, it's an all right tier 2 LAN, but why are they adding themselves to the mix? And they literally, it ended up backfiring. It's like you can only win the tournament, and they lost. It's like, well, you fucked now.
Duncan, you were there. Can you honest to God tell me that there wasn't a single team or player there that just took that event as another paid vacation? Like, there had to have been teams that went there just because it's on a fucking Greek island and they wanted to sit in the sun.
Oh, that's a very clever gimmick, by the way. Yeah. There's a very clever gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, why not? And also, I mean, it's right after the break, so it's basically just an extension. I could imagine a world, or I mean, it's right after Malmo, but, you know, very close after the break. But I can imagine a world where there were teams there that, and I don't know, I'm not saying this about SK specifically, but I imagine there's a couple teams that went there because they're just like, it'd be a cool place to chill. You know, play a best of 3 a day. Other times you get to sit in the infinity pool, you get to look out over the ocean, you get the good views, you get the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I mean, I'm not against that. I'm not against that, by the way. It's fair play to him. Fuck it. If I would have gone.
As someone who comes from the NA scene, is it too sweeping a statement when people make out like all the NA teams basically play fairly loose? I mean, everyone says there is a lack of in-game leaders, which seems fairly clear cut, right?
Right. If you're comparing it though to other teams, like there's no Navi, but Navi's on one end of the spectrum, and then some like premier team would be on the other end, just like kind of pugging all the time. But they still have strategies and whatnot. I mean, you could look at Cloud9 today, and there's still like, I mean, there's an objective in these rounds, and they're still doing strategies, but you'll watch like, I don't know, like G2 today, and like their strats aren't that much different than other teams. There's a lot of like, I guess like kind of how they progress through the default is what you would really determine this off of. And it's kind of like just how much room they have to work with. Like G2 looks looser than Cloud9 in some ways. Like Apex is dry peeking things. NBK is just kind of playing off his teammates. They still go into strategies that have like really nice flashbangs and everything like that. But there's maybe by looseness, it's kind of I think that's just kind of a misconception because you're seeing them in this like Twitch light all the time.
I think it also depends on. I wouldn't agree with that statement either, but I think most of that comes from the fact that, you know, when I think of North American teams that are, you know, not to be disparaging, but worthwhile to discuss in the international context, you know, I'm putting like Liquid, CLG, Cloud9's going to be up there. I'm probably missing one, but I mean, once you go towards like the bottom of the professional scene, which I haven't seen, but I imagine a team like Rogue, I imagine a team like Ghost Gaming, I imagine teams like Splice. Yeah. I would put money on that they're more loose with less actual like structured strategies.
Well, Splice has actually some pretty good tactics. I know what you mean with Ghost, with Rogue. I played them in a qualifier recently, and one of their strats they used against us was like third round, here, Wrath, have an AK, just kill all of us, and we all died, and he aced us. And it was just like, okay, that's kind of disgusting.
Sounds like it worked like a motherfucker.
No, that's actually a really rigid strategy. Wrath.
Is that Wrath kid like that 15-year-old or something like that?
Yeah, he's a 15-year-old. Is
he really that good?
This is so my one like claim to fame in our close qualifiers I killed him 13 times. He killed me 9 times, and a lot of those were in early round engagements. What he's really good at is that he does win aim duels too, but he's really good at just kind of like reading the beginning of a round in a default and just saying, if I go into this position, I kind of can use the intel that I've gotten from previous rounds to like understand what's going to work, what's not going to work. And then he has someone like Hiko to clean it up a lot. Another guy to look out for is Neptune, also another young talent on Ghost right now for 15-year-olds.
Yep.
But yeah, he's
just loving those 15-year-olds, aren't you?
I actually saw Neptune and B from Ghost Gaming at a hotel not too long ago. I was
Where's
just like,
the fuck's this going? Wait a minute, rephrase that fucking statement right there. Yeah. Rephrase that fucking statement right there.
yeah.
What do you mean you saw him at a hotel? That's where people go when they're meeting prostitutes. What are you talking about? Rephrase that statement.
Pizza party.
You saw him, and by the way, purely coincidence, it was in a hotel. Yes.
But some of them are loose, some of them are structured. I'm not saying all of them are loose, all of them are structured. There's not that like So with EU teams, there's kind of like this like stages of a round that you can clearly see. With Astralis, they're like taking map control in steps, and you can totally see that with Cloud9 or sometimes Liquid's better at it. Liquid takes map control pretty well, but with Cloud9 for example, they're kind of just like getting it. They're just like pushing, and they don't have this like rigid system in place of how they're going to do something. Whereas a team like G2 has structure in kind of getting that, but the way it might look like from a spectator is that they're just peeking, like but how did that come about? Why they decide to do that? And like, are they playing off of a teammate really, or are they just kind of doing it? And
it seems like I was just going to say, it's just like the difference between walking into map control and like actually having a checklist to throw utility. So like, for example, on Liquid, when they were in Inferno, like even on anti-ecos, you can tell like they have a set banana take, where it's just like, okay, we take banana, we leave whoever at top banana, go mid, try to work top mid. They have like a clear checklist in play. I think that's what separates for sure someone like Stewie2K or Tarek as a leader versus when you have a massive authority figure like Zeus, who's like, no, you have to do X, Y, Z before you enter onto a site.
And by the way, I don't find that like just to clarify with in-game leaders like Stewie and Tarek, I don't think that's like, it's something they lack as in-game leaders, but I don't necessarily fault them for it because they've never had an in-game leader or a coach to teach them that. So I don't want people to take that the wrong way, but I think that's the big reason why I know me specifically, I've always made the issue of a lack of in-game leadership in North America, like priority number one and problem number one for the region, is because if you want this to improve, it's not going to necessarily happen with the players we have of this generation. It's more likely going to happen with the 15-year-olds like Wrath and Neptune coming up when they have 2 or 3 more years. They need to have an in-game leader that can teach them that to go through those processes as well. And that's how you build up a scene. It takes years. So the fact that we have none now means no one below is learning. And then if we don't have anyone below learning, then they're not going to be able to pass that on to the next people as well. So that's where this kind of a situation gets pretty scary, to be honest. But I mean, that is kind of the difference between these teams. And I think there's like 3 or 4. I think even CLG does a pretty good job with it. I think Optic is going to do an okay job with it from talking to Freiburg and Malmo. That'll be a fun project to see how they develop. But
so
I think CLG is really good.
Okay, yeah, what are you gonna say?
I was just going to say that with Ryu on CLG, I think there'll be a lot more structure in that sense as well, especially when he's working closely with FNS.
Okay, so one team I wanted to ask about in this respect, because again, it's a team that the in-game leader has a long history of being looser style, is EnVyUs. Because actually, people think, okay, that I was just hating on EnVyUs because people stupidly tried to like counter them with G2, which is like, don't contrast G2 and EnVyUs. It's not going to work out well for EnVyUs ever, and they know that, right? But it's even worse than that. It's not just because they were so shit at the first few LANs that I rag on them. Like, I look at that team, I still don't know how it could ever work. I never knew how it could ever work. And after having seen them at a bunch of LANs, I don't think it can ever work. Because I look at that team right there, right? Historically, Happy Style in the era when he had the good players was pretty loose. We're not talking about like the early days of LDLC, etc. The era when he had Shocks, and then he had Kenny S, and he had Apex, he had a fairly loose playing style, famously, as we've alluded to earlier in the show. But this team that they have right now, this is a perfect example of how you can make a team where the names look good and they will never play as well as the names. Because I look at that squad, where are the playmakers? They have like a whole bunch of like passive playmakers who want to follow up on something someone does. Like Scream's never going to be your entry player. RPK is going to walk around the whole map and just gradually, consistently shoot people, but that's it. Happy himself, we all know his own foibles and his own problems, and he actually has his own very extreme way he needs people to play to make him good. I look at that team and they're in so much trouble, I think.
What is XMS's role, like, specifically? I haven't caught too many EnVyUs games.
Yeah, the only games I've watched, he was sort of like pushing out of Ivy early and then sort of like working off of Scream in some way, but like I've only watched literally like 2 or 3 of their games.
Well, in that case, that's the end of that topic, because apparently they are so insignificant, no one even watches them. So I think, at the end, I have like a default win on that one.
I know what you're saying though. Like everyone's so passive. Like the big thing that they have to hope for, right, is if Happy is going to be lurking. And I think I actually haven't seen too many EnVyUs games recently as well. But I don't think he's in that. Like, is he still in that super hardcore style of lurk? Because I thought he's kind of starting to break out of that.
He doesn't do it 100%. Yeah. But he also did do the most extreme version we've ever seen from an in-game leader. With that said, all I'll say is this: if on train they do a 0 armor P250 buy rush, he will still be the last one to die. No matter what. Now, in that context, lurking does not exist. You are doing a 5-man rush down lower train. The only way you can be last is if you spawned last in the site every time. And as I have said to a lot of my teammates out of rage over the years, your character model does not run any slower than mine out of the spawn, motherfucker.
Maybe he had to go back and buy a nade.
He's also still taking the AWP as well.
It's like
the secondary AWP.
Is he the guy that like accidentally runs into the wall?
No, yeah. Shit! I got stuck on the truck. Oh,
I'm
fuck.
taking a sip of water.
Oh, my movement. Oh, shit. Sorry, what? I was alt tabbed. Yeah, in a pro game. Fuck you.
Just be hopping into a wall.
Oh man. Who else have we got? Who else?
No, they're just like they're so grossly out of place at ESL One New York, EnVyUs. Like, it'd just be so sick if G2 was there.
What I love, dude, is that they are just literally my poster children for, like, will win every online qualifier and shit the bed at the line. And so everyone who's like, no, online's quite like offline. I'm like, well, now let's watch EnVyUs play. Oh, what's that? Nothing? Nothing at all? Well, then you see them online again. Absolutely great. Probably have, like, fucking 75% win rate online or something mental.
Yeah, I feel like with EnVyUs at ESL One New York, it's like a really good half of a tournament. Like if you had an extra 4 teams, or like an extra 8 teams.
It is a very interesting tournament, isn't it?
Yeah. Because they're missing, they're missing like a fair few cool teams because it's like so disjointed with Montreal and ESG.
Dude, it's because like G2 and Gambit lost in the qualifier. Like I think G2 lost to I think it was G2.
Yeah, they lost.
One of them lost to some Polish team.
It's still a pretty solid list
G2
overall.
Outside it is, but it's not as ridiculous as it would have been, though.
Yeah.
G2 lost.
Okay, well, Gambit then lost to literally like the 3rd best Polish team or something mental, you know.
They lost to Big.
Bloody.
Wait a minute, right? I'm going to look it up, but one of these, if I find out, the wrath that I'm going to bring down upon you will be unbelievable. So let's see. Let's just see who it was. Let's see who it was. So we're going to just go here. European qualifier. Okay. European qualifier. Where are we going here? Okay. So, let's see. Which qualifier am I thinking of then? E-League, maybe. Was there one for the E-League?
Maybe the E-League Premier qualifier. That one was like just upsets all over.
Yes, that might be the one then. But there's one where like literally a Gambit or G2, I think maybe it was Gambit, lost to literally like the 3rd best Polish team you've never heard of. Yeah. That's this Gambit, the good one, by the way.
There's a lot of BO1s in that. So yeah.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
Right, unless anyone else can think of another good loose playing style team, that is the end of the episode. So does anyone else have a last team to bring up a Hail Mary?
No, but why don't we do this Hail Mary for fun? Why don't we just pick the 2 teams you think will get out of Group A and Group B of New York?
Okay, wait there a second. So I'll just for people who remember, you have to remember some people don't have the screen open, right?
Yeah.
So we'll do each group. So Group A is SK Gaming, Cloud9, Natus Vincere, Team EnVyUs. Now, by the way, what is the format for this?
GSL, I think.
Yeah, I think
it is. But what does that mean?
I think it's like, GSL with 3. The best of 3 is the elimination.
Best of 3 to get out of the group.
Yeah, opening and winners matches are best of 1s. The elimination and decider games are best of 3.
Right. So it's the same as
same as Malmo, except the losers, not the winners match.
Yeah, it would only Moses would say it's the same as this one, but different.
Yeah.
Only he would do that, but so same as the ESG Mykonos actually, which you didn't watch. So okay, so who wins then? Because SK, Cloud9, Na'Vi, EnVyUs. So which 2 teams make it out? Moses.
SK Na'Vi.
Why?
Like we said, I don't think EnVyUs is anything that good. I think they're going to be outclassed in terms of skill. I think Cloud9 needs more work. I haven't seen anything too promising out of them. I'm very scared because some of the matches that I haven't watched many of them. So like my information on how they play is a little outdated. But even when I just check the stats, they always have like someone different is top fragging, which really worries me because if that's happening, I feel like you're playing like a loose style that's really based off who's the hot hand and who's doing really well at the time, and you don't have a whole lot of set things to fall back on. I don't think they have anyone on their team that's going to be able to slow down Simple. I think he's going to put him in body bags. And I think SK, even though they are struggling and have had a couple bad tournaments and bad runs, I think they're still going to be able to take care of Cloud9.
Okay. Who do you have getting out of that one, Mauisnake?
Definitely SK. Second one, it's more on the fence about, but I would actually agree with Navi. No, it's just they look a little too discombobulated right now. Cloud9 at least. EnVyUs, I don't know. I didn't see the qualifier for this, but maybe they're showing up with something. But I still think they're outclassed by Navi as well. I think Navi's had what was the last tournament they played? Malmo, right? So they've had some time in between here and there to like sort out some kinks and whatnot. And I know Zeus isn't going to let things just go untouched. And
they played E-League as well. That was on the weekend.
They looked pretty decent at E-League, by the way.
Yeah, they learned that what now turned out to be a pretty hard group, to be fair.
Yeah.
Not like some of those other garbage ones. Shout out to my ex-employer. Right, Max, who do you have getting out of Group A? Still mates. You know.
I agree with Maui. I agree with Mauisnake in a way. It's just like Cloud9 and Navi is sort of a toss-up in some ways because I think Cloud9, just in terms of rifling, like Edward's been really underwhelming for me as a key member of Navi's T side. But I think you just can't control simple if you're Cloud9. I think he's just so good. And so yeah, I'm going to go with SK Navi, and I don't know anything about EnVyUs. So
okay, so I mean, I will actually concur with everyone and say SK Navi. But here's the thing: like, I do realize on theory it is like Navi and Cloud9 are the borderline ones, but I just because of the best of ones, I also think there's a world where fucking Navi just wins this group. Like, no joke.
For sure. Yeah.
Right now, I made this statement which might confuse people the distinction, but after watching the last weekend's tournaments. I said, like, for me, I think Kenny S is actually the best player in CS right now because of the way you use him in his team. It's so consistent and he's just so impactful. But in terms of, like, pure fragging, and when I say fragging, by the way, that just means you can put the most kills on the board at any one time. Doesn't mean anything beyond that. You might then die all the time. You might lose other clutches. You might not be that impact. In terms of pure fragging, no one in the world is at the level simple as that at the moment for the last, like, 3 months. Like, that reminds me of Nico last year, where it's like every game you put him in the server, you know he's going to go absolutely mental. So SK have had their vulnerabilities. Cloud9 obviously still getting it together. I think that should be enough to get Navi out of the group, surely, especially if it's 2 lower bracket best of threes. Like, come on. If you can lose a lower bracket best of 3 to Cloud9 and EnVyUs, you probably don't deserve to get out of this group. So I think that's fine. Right, the other one's probably the more interesting one because this one, name values through the fucking roof. And then basically, here's the interesting thing. So the other group is Faze, Astralis, Team Liquid, Virtus Pro. So what's interesting about this group is 3 of the teams in the group have totally set rosters that they've had all year. Only Faze has changed. But they're all obviously in different states of array. VP have actually had plenty of problems. Had problems at the fucking ESG Mykonos tournament, mate. Then you have Team Liquid, had a good run there. Astralis has actually, I mean, for the first time ever, they didn't place top 4. Even so, most people still unfairly highly rated. And then Faze is obviously the new team, but they did get out of their group at E-League. So we'll start the reverse order this time, right? Max, who gets out of this group?
Yeah, again, it's like such a toss-up, but you have to go, like, for sure Astralis to probably beat Liquid, so that automatically puts them into a best of 3 against probably Faze. Yeah, so I reckon I'd go
Wait a minute,
Astralis.
Right, this is where Moses fucked you up. The best of 3s are all the lower bracket.
Oh,
whoa, I didn't fuck anyone up.
You picked one of the only tournaments ever to use GSL and use a winner's bracket best of 3 and said it's just like that, but with the opposite change. You could have gone with
just keeping you on your toes, motherfucker.
Exactly, yeah. So anyway, it's just the lower brackets of the best of 3s, mate.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll go Astralis and Faze. Just like Astralis looked really, their T side especially on Cash at Malmo against Gambit, there was like some really worrying things in terms of they weren't really decisive. They looked lost in rounds and a bit apprehensive, which I haven't seen from Astralis for so long. So that's could easily be a one-off though, and so they could I think they can definitely get out of this group. And then Faze, I think their players are so intelligent and they're all very mature players as well. I think they'll be quick to fix up any mistakes they saw in the recent games, and be sure to get out of groups here.
Okay. Right, who do you have, Mauisnake?
Well, in the words of Sadicus, it's the Big Apple and Snacks is hungry, so I think he's going to lose two right away. Just go eat. He's hungry, so he's going to just go leave the tournament and go eat. So probably actually Astralis and Liquid, and I think Astralis they're just too consistent to not make it out of a group stage ever, and Faze, I think they're still struggling a little bit. This could be either their tournament, or but I'm going to go with Liquid because they just look more consistent. They know what they're doing all across the map on pretty much on most of their maps. The grand finals in Greece were kind of messy, but I think they had like game plans at least for most of what they were doing. And I don't know if Kerrigan's like, I think he's still kind of toying with what he wants this Faze roster to be. So I'm going to go with the teams that are just, they know what they're doing. So Astralis and Liquid.
Okay. Moses.
Going Astralis Faze. I think Astralis. I mean, Astralis is Astralis. I don't want to focus on them too much, but I watched Faze at E-League, and they looked much better. I think the pieces are going to start fitting into the puzzle, and I think actually there is like a puncher's chance that Liquid or even Virtus Pro can get out of this group. But I think for both of those teams, they have to rely on 2 best-of-1 wins. I think both of those teams are really going to struggle if they get into a best-of-3 series. Although I guess the X factor for VP is the fact that apparently Taz is going to be the in-game leader now moving forward, and I do think that Liquid is going to look good against both Astralis and Faze, but I wouldn't be surprised if they upset. I just don't think they can win one of the best of 3s to get out, which is going to be the difficult part. Especially, I think actually Faze will go out probably top of the group, and then I think Astralis in a best of 3 is just too much for either of these squads to beat. I think Liquid did it was that ECS or was that just a BO1, Duncan?
They only won a best of... No, wait a second.
That Inferno game or something like that?
Let me think.
That was the one you were all pissy about because like apparently they had like 70 degrees in their
no they won overpass in the best of 3 in the last
okay yes. Yep. But regardless, I think Astralis and Faze are just going to be too strong. I think Liquid's best chance would be I think they can beat Faze in a best of 1. I just don't know if they'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's the thing with Liquid. Like from watching them play, it looks like at least their success can be replicable. Like it looks like it can be consistent, but there's clearly like structure and a lot of thought behind it. It's not relying on like Twists or JDM or Liege or Nitro, any of those guys just making like really big plays every round. It seems like, there's some actionable steps being taken by the team to be consistent, which is cool.
So for the predictions, I'm going to be boring and say Astralis and Faze, but I actually do think that this group, unbeknownst to some people, is a lot better actually than the form looks like. Because first of all, normally I would like if I hadn't read that news that you read, Moses, that Taz is going to be the in-game leader again, I would actually say, right, eliminate Virtus Pro immediately. They won't get out the group, and they're actually terrible. Because I think that this slump they were in was beyond anything they were ever in before. They were absolutely terrible, and worst of all, because Snacks was the in-game leader, he's one of the only players I've ever seen to do this. He made himself the in-game leader and then ruined his own playing style and became terrible. Go and look at Snacks for the last 6 months. This is a guy who averages like 0.6 FPI. He was one of the best players in the world. Ruined his old playing style. Wasn't a good in-game leader. They didn't have great T-sides. So essentially gave nothing to the team. Like literally, in that, I can't believe they let it go on for so long.
I should preface this by saying the video that I'm using to say that Taz is the new in-game leader is one from Pasha just saying it at the airport after Greece. Taz is back to being our captain.
I stand by everything I'm saying.
This isn't the official news release.
Okay, stand by everything I'm saying. So first of all, qualifier. If Taz is not the new in-game leader and it's still Snacks, they will definitely not get out of the group, right? But anyway, if they do, I think that could be a lot more positive. Because first of all, Taz was really fucking bad when I watched him play at ESG Mykonos. Like he was an absolute bot. So being the in-game leader, first of all, will take away some of the pressure in that respect. He's not expected to frag. Hopefully Snacks can be better. And secondly, they've had all their success in Virtus Pro when either Snacks or Taz was the in-game leader, when either Taz or Neo was the in-game leader. None of it was in the periods, because there's been times in the past where Snacks took over. It was never when they had their biggest successes. So that can help. Now, with that said, that is not going to overnight, I suspect, transform Snacks into an amazing player, make Virtus Pro a really good team again. I think right now, they have the worst combo of bad and good players because their best player is Pasha and Bialy's been pretty good, right? That combo somehow doesn't make the VP style work. Neo's been very average. I don't think I ever saw him win a clutch in the LAN, and Snacks was non-existent and he was their star player. So I feel like that combo is terrible for them to do well, especially in what I think is a pretty stacked group. Team Liquid's way more interesting. If it wasn't for the fact that there's best of 3s to get out, that just makes it tough to think they're going to do well against these level of teams. You know, if you're playing Astralis or Faze in a best of 3, that's fucking tough. With that said, I did like a lot of what they changed. I think that they certainly, I would have been tempted if it wasn't for the fact I think Faze has so much potential to pick Team Liquid. Astralis, I don't think it's panic stations yet. Listen, it's not great that they haven't won a tournament for fucking 7 months or 8 months or whatever it is. But with that said, for me, they've lost one map at Malmo because it was easy in the group stage, cleaned that up. In the bracket stage, Gambit did exactly what you should do, which is pick Cash, one of the maps that they play the least. Yep. They still almost won that map, and then they shit the bed on Mirage, but against what is probably the most weird CT style I've ever seen, and I haven't even seen Gambit continue that, because actually Gambit played Mirage at Mykonos, but then won so hard on their own T-side, I never got to fucking see them on the CT side. So I don't know if that can even exist, or if that was like some one-off that only works against Astralis. So I'm not that worried about Astralis. I think they'll get out, especially because of the best of threes. So really, it's just down to Faze. And the problem with Faze is, I'm not someone who actually is skeptical. Like, I was very skeptical before I saw them play. I thought they were all right in Malmo for a first tournament. Thought they looked good at E-League. I think all in all, while they probably still have a lot of gaps and they're far away from efficiency, I think they've got enough pieces. Carrigan looks like he knows what he's doing. The progression should be there. So unless Team Liquid's going to like continue to evolve, and obviously they have like 3 days or something mental probably to do it, I think Faze and Astralis is a safe pick. I think we'll just end the episode there unless anyone has any final burning point.
Fuck y'all.
Welcome everybody. Blessed are those that visit to this channel and enjoy the content here.
Hello guys, this is Gabriel Fallen from Team SK Gaming.